See, that wasn't so bad.
You're right. This is easy.
Testing, 1, 2, testing.
Meetings and just
Hundreds of dollars, honestly.
Ready?
$2. And we give like, my wife collected like
Okay.
coins, like those kind of.
So we're gonna get started, but as I usually do, if you have a cell phone, please turn it off or silence it. Everybody's had a chance to do that, so I will call to order the Oregon City Commission regular session for Wednesday, May 1st, 2019. It's about 7:03 p.m. We did have an executive session for the City Commission from 6 to about 6:45 pursuant to ORS 192.602E. Deliberations with persons designated by the governing body to negotiate real property transactions, and 2H, to consult with counsel concerning legal rights and duties of a public body with regard to current litigation or litigation likely to be filed. Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Rachel Lyle Smith. Here. Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
Here.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Denise McGriff.
Present.
Mayor Dan Holliday.
Here. If you please stand and join me in the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we have one thing under ceremonies and proclamations. It's the proclamation for Historic Preservation Month and the presentation of the Ruth McBride Powers Memorial Award. I apologize to Vicki and David Gackel. I'm going to have Commissioner Smith do the presentation because I have a hard time standing right now. I've got a little issue going on my back, but I will read the proclamation, and then Laura's got a little something to say, and then Commissioner Smith can present the award. Proclamation, Historic Preservation Month, May 2019. Whereas historic preservation is an effective tool for managing growth and sustainable development, revitalizing neighborhoods, fostering local pride, and maintaining community character while enhancing livability. And whereas historic preservation is relevant for communities across the nation, both urban and rural, and for Americans of all ages, all walks of life, and all ethnic backgrounds. And whereas it is important to celebrate the role of history in our lives and the contributions made by dedicated individuals in helping to preserve the tangible aspects of the heritage that has shaped us as a people. Now, therefore, I, Dan Holliday, Mayor of Oregon City, do proclaim May 2019 as National Preservation Month and call upon the people of Oregon City to join their fellow citizens across the United States in recognizing and participating in this special observance. In witness whereof, I have hereunto set my hand this first day of May 2019, Mayor Dan Holliday. Laura?
Thank you very much. Our history is very important. It shapes who we are and helps inform our future as well. In Oregon City, we're happy to celebrate Preservation Month by doing a couple of activities. We're going to be doing some tours of the McLaughlin Promenade and the elevator. Those are both listed on the National Register of Historic Places. We'll be doing those tours Thursday, May 9th at 4 p.m., as well as on Saturday, May 11th at 1 p.m. and 2:30. You can sign up on our website to go to those tours. Also,
Hang on.
Yep.
So I tried to go sign up today, and I still haven't figured out how to do it. So when you go to Eventbrite, it takes you to the page that says what it is, but there's no place to actually sign up.
I will take care of that.
Okay.
Thank you for letting me know. And then we're also going to do a history pub, so the planning division's working with the library, and we are teaming up on May 30th at the Midway Pub at 7 p.m. We will have Nancy Nelson, who's an archaeologist with the state of Oregon State Parks, and she's going to talk about some archaeological discoveries in Oregon, some newer ones, as well as some past discoveries as well. So those are the events that we're doing. The last thing that we're doing is this Ruth McBride Powers Preservation Award. Ruth McBride Powers was very meaningful to us in the city. As we know, she helped preserve many historic homes in Oregon City that are of utmost importance, as well as throughout the state. So think Ermitinger and Rose Farmer Carver, the list keeps going on and on. And so we've set this award, and every year it goes to people who have displayed passion for historic preservation. This year, the award is going to Vicki and David Gackley, and they have done a lot of work on two houses on 14th Street. So between Main Street and Center Street, so by the railroad tracks.
Better as behind the
Ice
Trails End
Trails-
pub,
Trails End.
towards, between Trails End and the, what used to be the produce stand.
Yeah, kind of up on the side of the road, there's a series of three, it used to be single-family homes, and there was a storefront improvement grant that was helped in these projects as well. But a lot of work both inside and out. This is the Mary Harris house. This house is from 1904. So there's the before and after for each of these houses. This house is next door to that, which is the George Clark House, and this is from 1867. And so we are so grateful to have people that invest in our structures, and so we can retain them in our character as well. David Gackley is here as well for the award.
No, they're okay there. You boys want this? No.
No.
Oh, yeah, if you, yes, you can use that, sorry.
You'll regret that later, Dad.
These.
All right, David,
Yes.
nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Well, thank you for being here tonight, and I want to make this presentation. We all love history so much. Well, maybe we don't all, but I do. As a former recipient of this award, and someone who knows the importance that Ruth McBride Powers had in this town, and knowing that these two houses are one of a very small amount of houses left in the downtown, historic original houses to the downtown. I think there's half a dozen maybe left. It's really important to see these buildings last, and it takes a lot of work to do that. And so I want to acknowledge you and the work that you've done with some help from the city to restore these houses. And so David and Vicki, congratulations on the Ruth McBride Howard Award for 2019. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Smith. So moving on, we are at citizen comment. Citizens are allowed 3 minutes to present information relevant to the city, but not listed as an item on the agenda. And I'll go back to my backup page here.
Oh.
So I guess we'll, Mike Mitchell and Bob Mahoney. Understanding that these are not comments about anything on tonight's agenda, correct?
We'll see.
Then I retain my right to shut you down, Bob.
Just stand in line.
Mr. Mitchell, Commissioner Mitchell, actually, sorry.
Mike Mitchell, I'm an Oregon City resident. Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, thank you. I want to be careful how I say this, because the last thing I want to do is malign good work on behalf of our city that a couple of involved groups of citizens are doing. But I get my Oregon City News today, and there's two wonderful stories on the front page, one about Latourette Park and one about the Buena Vista House. And again, in both cases, involved committed citizens group, which I think is great. And to me, these public-private partnerships is a way that we may be able to make a dent in our funding going forward, and I encourage it. What I'm concerned about is our priorities, how we're setting them, who is involved. I was surprised to read of a $490,000 ask that's going to be in the budget on behalf of improvements at Latourette Park. I'm no longer on PrAC, but I was until the end of the year. I didn't speak to every PrAC member this afternoon, but I spoke to several of them. Not a word. Again, and I want to say,
Not a word what?
not a word that was never brought before PrAC.
Okay, thank you.
That there was going to be a budget ask, particularly of that amount. You know, we know we're short on money. We're short on staff time. And no matter how well-intentioned these efforts are and how important I think they are, and I think they're great, they are always going to require staff time and they're always going to require some degree of city funding. I think we need to figure out a way. How do we manage this? How do we encourage it? But at the same time, how do we keep it in the priorities for our whole city? I live in the Caulfield neighborhood. We still have no developed park anywhere east of 213. We still have Filbert Run Park that we own the property and have not developed. And my concern is, here's $500,000 for a project, and I'm not trying to gauge the relative merits of the project, but how did it get to the top of the line? And I just don't think this is the way we ought to be going about our business. Again, I applaud both of these groups, and I think public-private partnerships are great, but we got to figure out how to do it within our greater priorities and within our budget and time constraints. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, to be clear, it's not necessarily a matter of priorities so much as process.
It's process,
These
it's the
things
process
should
that,
have gone through PrAC.
it's the process that leads to the priorities.
Right. Okay,
And what is that process?
all right, thank you, sir. Mr. Mahoney?
Well, this should be, Bob Mahoney, I live in Oregon City. This should be somewhat of a fun project, but it's also very serious in the sense that we recently experienced a fatality of a pedestrian nature here in the city. And it, who knows, but it's so preventable if we just put our thinking hats on. And here in the next 5 years, we're gonna have a lot of pedestrians in this city. And they're all gonna be from out of town and not familiar with our crosswalks and our pedestrian sidewalks and things like that. And we all know that, that 7th Street and people come blasting down there from out of town and what have you. And we're the choke point for Clackamas County from people traveling in this direction. With those people that will visit the Riverwalk, they will eventually exit. And a lot of them will exit to experience the history of Oregon City. And they'll make the way using the elevator up to the 2nd level. And there's a crosswalk right out here at 7th and Center here. And it's not marked. And it's the gateway to the McLaughlin House and the Barclay House. Those people don't know that. They don't know that. They just know that they want to go there. Well, we've all had the experience of accelerating up Singer Hill. I do it to get my car, up the hill from the police car that's chasing me. So my point being that we're going to have to put our heads together, probably at the traffic advisory level, and make available to those people exiting the Riverwalk some sort of brochure as to this is the walkway that you might want to take advantage of, leading up the elevator to the Ermatinger House and to the library, if you're so inclined to do research and things like that, and eventually over to the McLaughlin House. And if you just give them a little guidance, it might ensure public safety in the sense of pedestrian safety. And we're going to be faced with that, whether or not we choose to be or not. It's just going to happen because of the nature of increased pedestrians on our sidewalks and what have you. So I would really encourage you to ask the traffic advisory board as to how you could develop a brochure to accommodate people as they're either leaving the Riverwalk or somewhere around the town, restaurants and what have you. If you're so inclined to, enjoy the city, here's a suggested sidewalk tour. That's all I gotta say.
Thanks, sir. Hey, so Jim, can you give us the Reader's Digest condensed version of what happened at Earl Street?
I looked at, I've read the police reports. The incident was actually caught on video. The dispensary that's right there it is an absolute clear video exactly what happened. The pedestrian had the right of way.
Was crossing from Mitzel uphill?
Was crossing from the the corner of Pearl and Malala, right outside of the marijuana shop,
Okay,
crossing over Malala.
all right.
Stands there, waits for the right-of-way. Right-of-way comes. There was a young male driver who was watching. He had a green light, but he was watching the vehicle on the other side of Malala from him. He had been involved in a traffic incident where somebody had their blinker on, so he assumed they were going to turn, and they did not, and he ended up in some sort of a crash. So he's really intent, is this vehicle have their signal on, and are they actually turning, or did they just have their signal on? So he's very intent on that vehicle turning. Watching that, once he realizes that vehicle's turning, he accelerates and goes to make a left-hand turn, and just hit the pedestrian who was in the middle of the crosswalk, almost through, and she went down, and it was just a horrific crash. He was devastated. A lot of people were devastated. We don't know for sure. It could be whether or not he did not see her because of the pillar in his vehicle. It's hard to say. But we have.
So this is a true definition of an accident.
Yes. Yeah. We have had John, Laura, everybody has been at the scene. We've met, talked about this. Even though it appears to be an accident, human error, are there things that we could do, changes to maybe mitigate something like this from happening again? People have seen the flags probably that are there. We do not know where those came from, but we're just kind of leaving them there.
Okay.
Questions, anybody, before we move on? Okay, so Paul Edgar and Joe Greenman.
Thank you, Paul Edgar, Oregon City, Kenema. And thank you for talking about historic preservation, because remembering that Kenema is a National Register Historic District with National Historic Places status, the whole area within the boundary. What I'm here to talk about, however, is public safety and an intersection on 3rd and Ganong Street. We have a fence that is built right out into Ganong Street, into the city right-of-way. It's about 12 feet out. It's 6 feet high, right on a corner, and it obstructs views. It's a safety issue, but it's also, it requires a city commission right-of-way permit to have any type of permanent fence like this that fully encloses this area and takes it away from public ownership.
Which they have.
Which they do. For a 6-foot high fence in the middle of a street?
They have, the city commission approved was it a vacation or a?
Construction.
Construction
Oh, hold on.
encroachment permit.
An encroachment permit.
They, to have a 6-foot high fence 12 feet out in the right of way.
I don't know if we knew the details of it.
Yeah.
Time out. Go ahead, Tony.
Can we, John, I think Mr. Lewis has some history of this.
Yeah, so we've talked about it, but we haven't actually brought that back to you, but that is something that needs.
Oh, I thought we did something a month or two ago about that.
No, nothing recent, but this came up about, I don't know, 6 months ago or so, but
Anyway.
Yeah,
Well,
we would recommend that, along with a lot of other recommendations that we're making for the Kenema neighborhood.
I would like, first of all, I think it's a public safety hazard, number one, and it currently is. But number two is it's 6 foot high, and the regulations, your code, says that a corner side yard fence can only be 42 inches if it's on the property. So now this one is out, not in the property, so I brought it to Laura's attention. Laura turns around to me and tells me, well, it's not on the city's, on the person's property, so I don't have control over it. The regulation says it should be 42 inches, but I said, well, what is this? If it's in the street, or it's in the yard, it still can only be 42 inches. Well, how do we enforce this? Well, when they built the fence, when they were rebuilding and doing a whole massive rebuilding, we brought it to code enforcement. I took it to John. I've taken it to Laura. But this is obviously something that just continues to fall through the cracks. And in effect, it's illegal, it violates your code, and nothing has been done. And in any event, to have a 6-foot high fence out there in narrow streets is wrong.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Green.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners. My name is Joe Greenman. I'm a resident of West Lynn. I'm here tonight as a member and the chair of the Governor's Commission on Senior Services. That's a commission comprised of 21 citizens of the state of Oregon that includes 2 members of the Oregon legislature. And our job is to advise the governor on the needs of elderly people and various public policy issues, including issues related to programs that serve senior citizens in the state budget. We also coordinate effective advocacy on behalf of elderly populations across the state. And on occasion, we advocate for and against measures before the state legislature. The reason I'm joining you here tonight is because I'm currently in the process of touring our community in the county here, because it's my pleasure to announce that the commission is going to be holding its next commission meeting at the West Lynn Adult Community Center on June 13th. The hours of that meeting will be from 9:30 to 4. I've been on this commission since 2012, and it's been a pleasure to be on the commission. We've done a lot of important work. However, we rarely interact with the public because we hold our meetings in a state office building in Salem. And I think it's difficult to access those meetings, difficult to know where they are, and most people aren't really going to travel to Salem. So I was made the chair by Governor Brown last fall, and my priority for the year was to get the commission out into some community in our state at least one time. And so, because I live in West Lynn, I sort of invoked my privilege as the chair to hold our first one there. So I'm touring some city councils and of course the Board of County Commissioners over the next month to promote our meeting on the 13th of June. We hope that we see some of you and some of the members of the general public who are either here tonight or might be watching via the telecast of this meeting tonight. If you're interested in anything having to do with senior services and the needs of the elderly or the activities of the elderly, we want it to be about a positive thing as well, because we know elderly citizens are contributing. They're still employed, they're still running businesses, they're volunteering, they're giving back to our communities as well as receiving services through various programs. So we're very interested in that. We want to hear real life experiences of elderly people from our communities. We know that you all, as city councilors, city commissioners, mayors, county commissioners, when you go out every 4 years, you campaign, you're meeting and interacting with a lot of senior citizens in the process. We know senior citizens vote disproportionately. So our hope is that if you have personal experiences that you want to share based on the needs of seniors and elderly in your community, if you have time, at any point during the day on June 13th, we would encourage you to come, address us, bring those issues forward. Our hope is to take a lot of public comment and a lot of interaction from the general public at this meeting, because we'll do our job better as at advising the governor if we hear from more citizens and interact more with the general public. So that's our goal. We hope to accomplish it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
So Joe, what does the commission define as seniors and elderly?
I'm the messenger, so
Yeah,
I'll tell
I
you.
understand.
I'll tell you, it's in the statute, it's 60.
60?
Yes.
60 and above?
60 and over, yes.
Almost there.
It's every man for himself.
All right, Christine Kaczynski.
Before Christine comes up, could I ask Mr. Lewis, a question?
Sure.
About so I think if you recall that Mr. Edgar came before the Planning Commission during my service on the commission, and that week I went out to this particular intersection, and I will say for the record that I do drive a car that sits up a little higher than most, a Subaru Forester, and I had trouble seeing around that corner. I was fortunate there was no car coming, but I tend to agree from my own personal experience of having driven that, that is a problem. And I really hope that we can come to some resolution to address it. I don't think that we need to be having obstructions in the public right-of-way. I have a concern about that, just from the standpoint of being a driver, and I do go to Kenema on occasion, but I went that way on purpose. That was, if a car had been coming, I wouldn't have been able to see it. And I went at night and during the daytime.
Okay, Christine?
Christine Kaczynski, I live in unincorporated Clackamas County. A few days ago, I was on your website and saw a notice about the Oregon City addendum to the Clackamas County Multi-Jurisdictional Natural Hazard Mitigation Plan. I have never heard of this and began to read the 60-page report, of which I've given each of you a copy. For the past 15 years, I've testified to this city on just about every annexation and including every one of the concept plans. In each of my testimonies, I stated to the city that I felt it could not meet its annexation factors, specifically Land Use Goal 7, which is designed to protect life and property from natural disasters and hazards. The city answered my concern in their staff report by stating all requirements of Goal 7 have been met, and that went to LCDC, so the state got that same information. I refer you to page 46 in the handout I've given you. Under Ideas for Implementation, the first bullet point states, use the mitigation plan to help the city's comprehensive land use plan meet State Land Use Planning Goal 7, designed to protect life and property from natural disasters and hazards through planning strategies that restrict development in areas of known hazards. So, got a big question mark in my brain. For 15 years, I've been testifying. The city says, oh, we've met all Goal 7 requirements. Now, when I look at this addendum, it's telling me something different. So I'm confused. Have you met them or have you not? Commissioners, are you aware of this? I certainly feel further discussion needs to take place. Specifically, how does this natural hazard mitigation plan link to equitable housing? I and your citizens would like to know when the city will address Goal 7 and its comprehensive plan regarding the protection of life and property from natural disasters and hazards. I have submitted 2 testimonies to you in the past 2 months regarding landslides and the catastrophic losses being borne by property owners that have been hit with landslides. I have shown you loss of home values as high as $400,000 in some cases. I have begged this city all of my life to upgrade its hazard regulations where you only now regulate steep slopes of 25% or greater. But I gave you proof that the landslides are happening on slopes of 5 to 18%. It's time for Oregon City to have policy governing the requirements of Land Use Goal 7. It's time for homeowners to be told if they are living in a landslide area, and it's time for them to understand there is no landslide insurance in the United States of America, so the losses are being borne by the homeowners. They need to know before they buy. I'm also giving you a page of Governor Kitzhaber's task force report on landslides and public safety that was completed in 1998. Please note the task force recommended that LCDC develop and implement landslide rules consistent with Goal 7 to improve the adequacy of site-specific geotechnical reports and to review evaluations regarding geotechnical hazards.
Ma'am,
This draft legislation
you're out of time.
was never completed because special groups fought it.
Thank you.
So I put this before you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
Ms. Kaczynski?
I'm sorry.
It's okay. I just want to let you know that I've seen your other testimony that you've provided over the last couple of months, and I wrote notes at the top and I've set them aside. I just want you to know that I've read them and I've seen them, and I think we have two. We're in the throes of the equitable housing, so I've purposefully set them aside until we could get this off of our plate, and I'm happy to revisit this topic. I think it's a good topic. I used to work for the Department of Geology, Mineral Industry, so I'm well aware of Slido and the LiDAR viewer and all of the hazards that they work on, and I think it's good work that we need to incorporate. It's just our plates are really loaded, and I just wanted you to know that I do have your comments that you have given us, and they are set aside. I have notes on them, and so hopefully we can return to it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I lost my agenda. There it is. So, no further public comment? All right, don't move on. Everybody okay with the agenda?
Yes.
Then I'm gonna make some changes.
Oh. Actually, I might have one.
So, under.
I do too.
We're gonna move the two items under general business up prior to, that's the Buena Vista Clubhouse and the alarm permit fees, prior to the land use, the code discussion. And then I'm gonna, right now, make an appeal to my commissioners. The medical advice I had said I shouldn't be here tonight, but I consider this issue too important. I'm gonna leave no matter what. I'm gonna appeal to you that you postpone the code update discussion, as I have postponed for several of you. Both Commissioner Smith, I made sure we held this over until after the first of the year. Commissioner Griff, I moved a couple of exec sessions for you to make sure that you were there and available. I'm just appealing to you guys that because I can't stay to postpone this discussion until, this is not a long-term medical thing. I just can't sit or stand for more than a couple of minutes at a time. So.
We would still take public comment and we would still do.
You can take the public comment, but I would appreciate we not have substantive debate or discussion about the items tonight, because, you know, I've always said that I wanted all five of us to be here when we've been having these discussions. And I think I've been pretty fair about that. So does somebody want to make a motion?
We've held it, you know, like several times. I think we need, I mean, a lot of people came tonight to testify, I'm sure, and should still do that. I don't really have a problem holding it over if it's needed, or if the rest of the commission agrees. So I will make a motion and see, make a motion to hold the debate over for the mayor.
So I think so we've got changes to the agenda. So we're gonna pull up Buena Vista House.
Well, I have another item for
Well,
that.
if we do that, I mean, if this discussion isn't there,
Then
then
item
the
will be-
agenda doesn't change.
Like,
There's
I guess so, but I thought we were gonna take, it sounded like there was a agreement to allow testimony on the legislative, on the
Oh,
code amendment.
That's right.
Right.
But that maybe not, and then to be determined on whether we would just continue it. The commission would take the public testimony
And then-
continue it to May 15th.
That's what I would prefer, yes, that's my motion.
But I think we'd probably wait until we get to that moment for that, I think.
To that agenda item.
Right.
We need to get to that agenda item, but I appreciate that the mayor wants to leave. So I think if we could have sort of consensus around what you want to do with the agenda, then the mayor could excuse himself and then we could proceed, if that's how you want to move forward.
So is there consensus on that from the commission?
To define what we're gonna do, we're gonna take public testimony without deliberation.
That's right.
Because those folks have shown up. Are we also, to clear the schedule, we are first gonna take the alarm matter and the Buena Vista House, and then we're out of the way?
Yeah.
Yes, and I would like to add to that, I want to pull the commission rules of procedure from the consent agenda.
I would agree with that.
You know, what?
I agree with
Well,
what Commissioner
it
Smith
doesn't
said.
matter, any individual commissioner has the right to
Yeah.
vote on it.
I was being supportive.
Is
Take
there,
a
well,
lesson.
I guess
Take
I
a
put it
lesson.
on top, so there's their,
I'm fine with that.
If that's the motion, and I'd second it.
I think we're going with a consensus at this point.
I was gonna say, I'm okay with that in the sense that I want to make sure that we give the staff some really clear direction at the end of that, so we're not bringing up everything again and again and again, because I'd like to move on. I know they want to move on. At least I'm supposing they want to move on, but I do as well.
I understand, but I think what I'm saying is Commissioner Smith is right. People are here to
Absolutely.
testify. We hear that, and then we just move it on to the next meeting. So we're not going to have any discussion about individual items.
Can we give direction to staff about a matter that we feel needs further definition and not engage in discussion over it?
Sure, as long as it's definition.
That's what it is?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we,
I'm in agreement with the proposal as stated.
I think I see a consensus in the room.
we're there.
So with that, I'm going to exit and hand the gavel to Commissioner President O'Donnell. Thank you,
What?
folks. I appreciate it.
All that being said, Chief, are you ready to present your alarm situation? So that's what we're going to move to initially.
Ready?
Meeting is back in order.
All right.
I'll make it formal.
Okay. Well, good evening, Commission. So the, this alarm issue, in a nutshell, I basically made, we made all the changes that you suggested. We went a little bit past that in that I think before we had low income with a little bit of a fee, and we just decided to just zero that to on the registration fee. We changed government to 25, same thing as a normal residence and business. And then the other item was what qualifies as low income. And we put it on the bottom of the sheet you can see on the document there. And basically the same system that utility billing uses, that same qualification process. If somebody's qualified to for the low income rates and utility billing, then they're qualified for the alarm program as well. If you have any questions, I will answer.
Any questions by the commission?
No, I would just make a comment. I know this is coming back to us because I said something about the fees, the change in fees, and I had, I don't know, just no other way to say it other than, just a little heartburn over raising the rates for our seniors and low incomes. And so I really appreciate us taking a second look at that and having a definition for the low income. So thank you for taking a look at that. And I think it's moving in the right direction.
I guess it's those people 60 and over as was defined by the Governor's Commission on Senior Services, so there you go.
That being said, do we have a motion?
Real quick, sorry, just one note, we're gonna call this a scrivener's error, just because this item has been delayed a few times. There is a change in the effective date. So we are going to change the effective date to July 1st, 2019. So,
With that modification, do we have a proposal to adopt the resolution as stated and amended?
Move to approve.
Second.
Call for the vote.
Commissioner Denise McGriff,
Aye.
Commissioner Rachel Lyle Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
Aye.
and President O'Donnell.
Aye. Moving on to the next item, we're going to move this up in the agenda to clear it. We're going to do item 7B, which is 19-277, discussion on the Buena Vista Clubhouse, a report on that. Who's presenting that?
I'd
Mr.
like
Phil
to make
Lewis.
a quick declaration before Director Lewis speaks. So just for the record, I want it to be known that I am a member of the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association, and I'm a member of the Friends of the Buena Vista Clubhouse.
So noted. Mr. Lewis.
Thank you, Commission President and Commissioners. So today before you, we have a discussion on the Buena Vista Clubhouse. We're seeking direction from the Commission on the request to reconnect power to the house to allow for some heat and security lighting to be placed in the facility. As you're aware, we presented information at the March 12th City Commission work session in relation to the history of the Buena Vista Clubhouse, the request of the Friends of the Buena Vista Clubhouse to reconnect the power and to supply heat to the home. Additionally, during that conversation, there were 2 points of direction that we received as staff. One being that the commission requested to know the full cost of connecting electricity. Is stated in the staff report, the $5,000 cost for reconnecting electricity has been fundraised by the stakeholder group and would not be anticipated as an expense by the city. The other costs that were inquired by the commission were to go back and look at insurance requirements, any other security needs or things that would be required if we reconnected electricity. At this time, we have contacted our agent of record. There would be no additional cost incurred by the city to reconnect electricity for our insurance premiums. There would be the ongoing monthly payment of the electrical bills. We did receive some comment from commissioners at the previous meeting stating that the Friends Group should pay for the ongoing cost of the electrical bills. Obviously, that was not the entire commission speaking, but so it would depend on whether or not it was still the wish of the commission as a whole to have the Friends Group pay for the ongoing electricity cost. If the city incurred that cost, it would be approximately $500 to $600 per year for that ongoing electrical payments for the monthly bills. The other piece of information that was requested by the commission was to have a work plan by the stakeholder group. So attached to the staff report is a work plan as submitted to staff for the upcoming 6 months, which included a couple of key points, one of which being the reconnection of the electricity, two, attempting to gain local designation and national historic designation for the property, and then the third, to continue to initiate conversations around the outreach and fundraising capabilities, and then some type of phased approach to the construction needs of the home. So with that, I will open it up to questions or anything else that I can answer.
I think what I'd like to do before we engage in questions and discussion, Mr. Damon Mabey is asked to speak. I think we should hear his input and then proceed.
Good evening, Commissioners. Damon Mabey, Oregon City resident and chair of the Buena Vista, Friends of Buena Vista Clubhouse. I guess, you know, it's ironic that it's National Historic Preservation Month, and we're trying to preserve a historic building. A building that we can find records dating back to the 1880s. Definite, clear records that date back to the 1930s when it was moved to that location. So it seems, you know, like that's something we need to do, is preserve this building. The reason why is, you know, I don't know if you saw the article today, but it mentions some of the conditions in the building, including that the floor is warping and rotting, because there's been no heat in the building. These have been the 4 or 5 wettest years we've had, and of course wood is going to go bad. I mean, if we would have just kept the power in the building, $2,000-3,000, we would have saved $10,000 to $15,000 worth of reclamation work. So that's what we're trying to do. And I want to be clear, we're a friends group. We're not trying to take over the building. We're here to supplement the work the city should be doing, to help raise awareness of it, to help market it, to help, you know, if necessary, raise the funds to get something started. But it is not our intent in any way to take over this building. It is to help the Parks Department get a revenue-generating asset back into their inventory. You know, Mr. Lewis, when he showed you the stuff during the work session, showed that it generated 3 to 5 times its cost in revenue, and that's with 0 advertising. You know, so if any sort of efforts put out, I mean, we've got very few venues for medium-sized, non-rich people to to use. I, had my wedding there because I couldn't afford a fancy, chapel, go out in the wilderness with swans and all that sort of stuff. I had a really nice ceremony in a really nice building in a really nice park. And so, that's an asset that this working class community needs. There are not enough meeting spaces, and there are a lot of meetings, a lot of opportunities for that. So we have a couple questions for you. One, we really do not think we should be paying the ongoing electricity. We think it's a minimal expense, and it's a city asset. The city should maintain it. And two, one of the comments that Mr. Mitchell made about things is how much staff time some of these things involve. We've got to perfect our work plan and to really inspect the building. We need access to it, generally not during working hours, because we're getting volunteers to come after they're done working, to walk around, after they're done. So what we would like is to have a key to the building so that we can access it after hours. We'll sign whatever requirements there is, but we've got people that are willing to come at 6. That's overtime for his staff. So we need to, there's just a lot of work that needs to get done, and people need more than, their lunch hour to try to come by and do this stuff. So those are the two requests we have, is that the ongoing electricity would be a city expense, and that we have a key or a lock box where we can pick one up or something like that, so that we can get the people in there to really look at it and get real detailed numbers to you and not guesstimates from a 10-minute walkthrough.
Thank you. I think the guide tonight's discussion is fairly limited, and please correct me if my fellow commissioners see it differently. We're being asked that the Friends group has said they're going to raise the $5,000 to reconnect electricity. The questions about insurance have been answered by the staff report. The question of who shall pay the ongoing electric bill and how, if we limit that, or if we agree to do it or don't agree to do it, that question needs to be answered. And finally, a new question brought up by Mr. Mabee about access and key after hours. And with that, I would open it up to questions or deliberation. Have I missed any points? Anyone?
Is
Commissioner Smith.
there anybody else in the audience that wants to speak on this?
The only listed speaker is Mr. Mabee.
They may be shy.
Well, in keeping with Ms. McGriff's former position, is there anyone else who would like to speak or comment on this matter? Seeing none, we'll open it up to questions and discussion. Commissioner Smith.
So I will agree with Damon that it's really ironic that we are again talking about saving a building on the day that we are celebrating historic preservation and celebrating how good of a job we really do in this city of preserving its history, and we do a lousy job. We do an absolutely lousy job. And by saying that, how do we do a lousy job? Well, we don't take care of the buildings that we own. That clearly, even if they're labeled historic or not, are historic in nature. And we try to, and this is over a period of, I would say in terms of the Buena Vista House, at least, 5 or 10 years, where we've kind of downplayed the history of it. And there's a perfect example of that in this report, where it says that the structure was erected in 1930. We know that's not true. We clearly know that's not true, because right before it says it was moved there in 1930. So the building was not erected in 1930, it was moved there in 1930. We know that, this is my historic research at the Buena Vista House. Several of us up here have our own files that we've put together of the history of this building. Clearly goes back to the early 1900s that building, that at least part of that building was built. So I think we have to be very careful about putting in the public record things like that, because staff leaves and comes back and we have these documents 20 years from now, when we're talking about the Ermitanger House, or excuse me, 20 years from now, when we're talking about the Buena Vista House again, someone's going to look at this report and say, well, the buildings were erected in 1930. And we clearly know that's not true. So we can't keep doing this. And so that needs to be fixed in the report. This reminds me of one of my first city commission meetings where the swimmers at the Oregon City, the swim teams at the pool came to the commission and asked for funding from the Parks Department to pay for the starting blocks for the swimming pool. Clearly our responsibility as a city to take care of our buildings. And we refused to do it as a city commission at the time, which I dumbfounded me from the beginning. And so much so that that citizen group went and raised the money themselves. And then came back and said, we will pay for half of it if the city just pays for the other half. Citizens raising money to pay for facilities maintenance and asking us to just match it. And we said no. I mean, I didn't, but the commission said no. And finally, after that meeting, I basically said, you get as many students or parents in here the next meeting to talk about this, and that this room was filled, and that night it changed instantly. This is our responsibility. And so I'm gonna go further with it. I want this city commission not only to say, we're gonna pay the electrical bill, because we're really gonna kick off Historic Preservation Month by saying that this group is gonna pay the electricity for our building. It's embarrassing. And it's so embarrassing that I'm gonna say, I think we need to pay the $5,000 to hook it up, and the Friends Group can spend their $5,000 or something to improve that building, or to add for programming, or to pay staff to open the door when they need it. That's what we need to do, and that's my motion.
Do we have another speaker that wants to
Yes.
join Mr. Roger Fowler?
There's a motion on the table, but I can wait, I'll withdraw it for discussion, yeah.
Okay.
Sir, if you want to come forward.
Roger Fowler Tice, city resident for 25 years, president of the Oregon City Parks Foundation. And in the process of and I just want to say, first of all, we're latecomers to the helping out with this project and all the hard work that has already gone on with the advocacy for this building. It's just terrific. Regarding the key, the Parks Foundation uses the Pioneer Center for its meetings. The Pioneer Center is closed when we have our meetings there. And I usually pick up the key from the Pioneer Center desk, which I keep overnight and return the next day. So maybe this is an idea you could use for this problem, and leave the key at the front desk here, and somebody could sign off for it, if that's what, from the group can sign off for it. Okay. And thank you, that's all.
Thank you. I don't want to expand the conversation into the ultimate future of this house tonight. I think it's a limited decision tonight, and I want to keep it within that realm if that's agreeable. Well, again, the 3 points we're talking about, and Commissioner Smith has expanded upon it, the $5,000 fee, the payment of the electricity, and the access after hours with the key. So, if you care to restate your motion.
Well, I mean, I threw so yeah, what do I state? My basic motion is to approve the, my basic motion is that we move forward on hooking up the power with the expense being on the city's responsibility, and taking over the electrical bill as well. And the $5,000 that the Friends Group has kind of set aside for this could be spent in better ways for the Friends Group to use in whatever way they see fit. And I just added to that. I won't put that as part of the motion, but theoretically, if they have $5,000 set aside and the issue is having staff there in a certain time, that money could be used in that way. but I won't put that as part of the motion. My main motion just to approve the $5,000 expense for hooking the power back up and the obligation to pay the electricity.
We want to have a discussion on that motion.
Well, I'm going to second it for the purposes of discussion. I think that as someone that's been involved in this from the onset, that we kind of I think we made as a group a commitment to do the $5,000. And we actually have another fundraiser coming up next week to help add to that total so that we can continue to do what we said we were going to do. So while I don't know, I'm looking over at Damon to see what he's saying about that, because I don't want to speak for him.
Do you want to, and he might not be able to speak for the group, I don't know, but do you have an answer to that question?
Several of the group are here.
I agree with what Denise said, that we raised the money for that specific purpose, and people did participate in our fundraising with the knowledge that that's what the money was going to go to.
Okay.
Okay.
That helps me.
Yeah. But with that, we'd be more than happy to do a match.
Okay, I will withdraw my motion with the second would be withdrawn.
Do you want to amend it?
I want to make two separate motions.
Okay, well, I'll withdraw then.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My first motion would be to approve the recommended action, which is to have the Friends Group pay for the connection of electricity. I will add to that I feel the city should take on responsibility for the electrical bill. That'll be my first motion.
I'll second it.
Is that a combination motion where we
Is
allow
that
them
two
to pay
separate?
the 5, or is it two separate motions? Because you combined them just now.
Yeah, that's one. There's a separate one I
Okay,
haven't
the
stated
motion
yet.
is, the Friends Group is allowed to pay the 5,000 as agreed, and I agree with that because that's how the money was earmarked.
Right.
The second part of that very same motion is that the city assumes the responsibility for the electric bill
Right.
over, whatever, a 12-month period.
For the rest of its life.
Okay.
As long as that building's standing.
Do you, is your second still standing?
Yes, I'm just trying to get a read from the members that are in the audience. Okay, I've got some head nods, okay.
Just call for the vote on that motion.
Commissioner Denise McGriff,
Aye.
Commissioner Rachel Lyle Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
Aye.
and President Frank O'Donnell.
No, only because of the stipulation for the rest of its life, until we clear things up. And it doesn't matter, I mean, it's just, I want to get this on firm ground, who does what, who agrees to do what, and decide what we're going to do tonight. So as of this moment, with that passage, the Friends Group pays $5,000, the city has obligated itself from its commission to pay for the electrical bill, with no cap on that. Okay.
I think that topic can be revisited.
Do we want to
Can we-
discuss the cap that we want to put on the rest of our city buildings for the rest of their lives too? Do we want to discuss that tonight?
I don't want to expand this, Commissioner Smith.
Okay,
just
I
want
have
to
a
take
second motion. Second
Okay.
motion is that we set aside $5,000 in our budget for maintenance to the Buena Vista House. That's our $5,000 match.
Anyone care to second that
I'll
motion?
second it, and I would like to have a comment by Phil, if you would like to make a comment
In regards
to
to
his, yes, what he's
the
talking about.
$5,000 maintenance obligation, I guess, yeah, just direction from the commission on how to, so staff working with the Friends Group to identify the most appropriate use of those funds and at some point reporting back to the commission on those efforts.
See,
I guess,
I'll state this, and it may be unpopular. I don't want to do this piecemeal.
I don't either.
And it feels like we're doing it piecemeal. And there will be a vote, whatever that may be, but there's things about it that trouble me, and the red tagging process troubles me.
That troubles me
To this
greatly.
day, because I don't know why it was red tagged. You know, I've
Nobody
been in
does.
construction, and usually there's a reason stated, structural deficiency, electrical problems. I get all that. I just want to approach this in a methodical manner, so I'm trying to resolve it. We've resolved 2 issues already.
Okay,
So what,
so here's what I want to, I do not want the city getting out of its responsibility for this building. And by not putting something on the table tonight in some form, and I'm open to how we do that, how this city leaves tonight, we're being responsible for its own damn building. Because without writing a check or motioning for some set aside of money, we are asking a citizen group who has formed only because the city deliberately closed that building, red tagged it, and slated it for demolition, which was only saved by my last, many of fits, to get it to where it is today. And so I'm sick of the city passing down its obligations, especially on the night that we're touting our amazing historic preservation. It's embarrassing, it's pathetic, and I want to hold the city accountable for its buildings. So how do we do that tonight? And we don't do it by having the citizens step up for $5,000+ and us $0.
and again, I don't think that's the issue. I think the issue is, I don't want to do a piecemeal. I think the 5,000 is like a token gesture. I think that we saw estimates that were useless to me because they were unable to be compared because of the way they were submitted. If we're going to be supportive of this as a city, I would like to see some standardized form, the estimates come together, we agree on the cost, we understand what we're getting into, and we vote on that as a total package and say, we, the city, agree or disagree that we're going to save this building or not save this building to the tune of X amount of total dollars. I think a lot of tonight is, I don't want to call it posturing. I know it's people are very earnest in this. I just want to do this in a methodical manner, and I think these gestures are, what does that get us in the end? And maybe it's an unpopular position, but I'm one that says if we're going to do this, whatever that amount may be, and you remember how widely the estimates were, they were
All over the place.
all over and they are incapable of being compared.
Right.
If someone comes before us with the estimates that are comparative, and we say, as a city, we choose to support this to whatever amount that is, that's how I would prefer to go about it, but I am one of only many votes. So we have voted in favor of
The $5,000.
the $5,000 being provided by
It
the
would have
Friends
been
Group. and
simpler for us to just pay it.
Well, that matter's resolved already.
I get that.
We're beating it to death.
So we have a motion and a second, unless Commissioner Lyle Smith or McGriff.
What is restate the motion so we know.
I just wanted to see if anybody else had anything to say before I say something, so
Feel free.
if, I don't know if Rachel has a comment.
Yes, I do. I do want to say that I agree with Frank, Commissioner O'Donnell on this one. And for Commissioner Smith, I don't think it's going to leave our vision and our discussion of parks just because whether or not we put $5,000 behind it. So it's clearly on all of our radars. The parks budget and the deferred maintenance is high on our priority list. That topic is not going away. It is one that we're going to be talking about, I think, quite a bit. So I'm not really concerned that this topic is going to fall off of our radar, just for that reason alone. But
If I were to individually give direction, I would ask that the RFQ, the quotations to bring it up to whatever a standard we agree upon, be standardized with the input of the Friends Group and the city, and we send those out, we get comparative estimates, and then we decide what we're gonna do. We all agree on the nature of the work to be done and how it will be accomplished and limitations on it, and we have a hard number in front of us that says, do you, the city, wish to save this building at this cost? If that sounds reasonable, that's what I'm putting out as a proposal.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think that the way that the group is trying to approach this is in a phased manner. And the $5,000 may not be cash money. It may be our coming in on a regular basis to consult with Phil, and that would be some of his time. Because he's not free. And we know that we want to try to keep, the group wants to try to keep the city's costs at least minimal at this point in time till we come up with the phasing plan. We have some ideas, but it needs to be fleshed out some more. I mean, we know the approach that we want to take, but again, as it's been said, the devil is in the details, and we know that there are details. We're very fortunate to have a local architect on the board who's familiar with this. The person that we would like to have do the work is our recent awards recipient, and for the Ruth McBride Powers Awards, we want to use multi-phase electric, and that's whose bid we have. So we've got that step. We understand that step. And I think that the way that you're approaching it, Frank, is really, in my mind, as a project manager, logical, step by step by step, and we bring this back, and we'll be talking with Phil, we'll be talking with Tony, and I'm assuming you concur with the direction that I'm going in. So I don't disagree with you. I just want to make sure that we are all comfortable about where we're going with this. I think it's, as Rachel said, it's the city's intent to work with this group to make sure that we can do something with this building, and I think in the long term, it is going to end up paying for itself. And again, I don't disagree with you. We are the premier city of history in this state, and we have to walk the talk, and we're trying.
We're sort of trying.
Well, one step at a time.
I would then like to know how we leave tonight with this commission. To me, just saying, oh, we're gonna help out and we're gonna say that this is a great plan and come back to us later and whatever, that makes no commitment at all tonight. And so I want, I'm trying, in fact, if I would have known that this would have been supported, I wouldn't even have made the motion for originally. I would have said just pay the $5,000, because at least we leave here tonight with our building being responsible by us. And now I regret it. What I want to know from this commission on the kickoff to Historic Preservation Month, seriously, think about it.
Yeah.
We're debating over paying $5,000 to a building that is our responsibility. I can't even believe we're debating it. I honestly can't, and I know that you're on the same page, so my question is, that's not the motion. What's the motion so that the citizens know when we leave here tonight, we're as a city taking responsibility for our building? And just saying we want to wait and see and hopefully support you and get a plan back is not enough.
I'm trying to leave passion and emotion out of it, and I'm trying to get a solution that works. Well, sometimes you have to make decisions.
So what do we,
Then make one.
what do we need?
Give me a moment.
Can you help out here so we can
Sure.
help Mr.
Well, I can try.
Commissioner Smith?
So we have a first and a second. If you
I'll
want.
remove it.
Wait, just wait.
Settle down.
So Commissioner O'Donnell has identified some more clarity that can be brought as to the proposal, both from an estimate standpoint, phasing standpoint, fundraising standpoint, and whatever else we identify as staff is working with the Friends Group. I think one thing that we can do is continue to work with them. There's question about local designation, historic, National Register designation, putting all this together in a package, potentially having a work session. We can invite the Friends Group in with the commission to walk through once we get to a point where we think we've addressed what we're hearing tonight. Getting to exact funding tonight, I don't know that I'm able to provide that right now, but that would be a path forward to continue this conversation, to get the commission to a position to eventually make a decision on what you as a group would like to do.
I feel that our first goal tonight was to prevent further deterioration of the building. And we can accomplish that by a vote on this motion by Commissioner Smith. The second part, if I, speaking as a commissioner, were to give clear direction to all involved, I would like to see the nature of the work defined by a mutual effort between the Friends Group and the city. Things like concrete, are we talking about a walkway? Are we talking about a full basement? And those, if you recall those other estimates, they were useless because they were incapable of comparison. So those two groups, that the city and that group sit down, define the nature of the work, say this is what we want the end product to be, and then we get quotes and then we discuss about how do we support that.
Yeah, part of our phasing is minimum standards to get the building back online and final standards, you know, for instance, ADA access. We can do it with a wooden ramp, but the ultimate goal is a cement ramp so that it's a long-term solution. But wooden one gets the building back online. So that's what we're trying to do with getting the access at these different times so we can measure, we can, you know, get costing for both options. You know, and frankly, it needs to be, I kind of agree that it needs to be part of a master plan for the park itself. Because the building isn't a standalone building, the park that's associated with it and access to it and its amenities are what really make it the gem that can be sold to the, you know, for weddings, for reunions, for, you know, I mean, it's not just a little meeting building. So that's what we want to work with is get the basics together for the building so it's safe and usable. Get together with PRAC and with Parks to come up with a final design. You know, is it going to be, you know, not gold fittings, but, you know, is how many bathrooms and how, you know, what's the kitchen going to look like? Is it going to have a kitchen or is it going to just be a meeting site? You know, wooden or cement access, fixing the trails so that people can go up the hill and use the thing. So we do want to do this collaboration. Step one is making sure the building doesn't fall down while we're all busy talking to each other. And I understand Commissioner Smith's frustration. I mean, I was buried there and 6 months later, there's a red tag on it. So I hope those weren't connected. There is a very much an intent to work with PRAC, with the Parks Foundation, with Parks, and come up with a good long-term solution. So it has another 80, 90 years of life. They're coming up on its 90th anniversary there. We want it to be there 90 years from now and be just as usable, actually much more usable than it is at this point.
And that's the goal in everything I've said tonight. Prevent deterioration, stabilize the building, determine a long-term plan of action, evaluate the cost, and make a decision. I mean, as it stands now, that building still stands under a red tag, right? Unsafe for occupancy, unsafe for use. I mean, that's the first assessment that needs to be made.
Right.
What do we do to bring that to at least a minimum standard? What do we do to bring it to the standard that this group and the city decide that that's what they want to pursue? So I'm not trying to say no to these proposals. I'm trying to do it in a manner that we don't wander in and we spend 5,000 here and 10,000 there and you guys, and the project subsequently doesn't go to fruition. I want it, here's what it costs to get it done. So that's my goal and not trying to be negative about it in any way. Commissioner Smith.
The reason that I'm so passionate, and you know this, and all of you know this, is the last time I was part of a Friends group working with the Parks Department to save a historic city-owned building. The idea that we leave tonight, and there's going to be such a smooth partnership between the Friends group and getting the house, you know, looked at, being on the same page, just let you know that will be a good 10-year process. And I don't want to just say, oh, well, you know, what this Citizen Friends group has done is great and thank you. But yet we take no responsibility at all. And that's what we're doing tonight. And so what I've just asked this commission with actually zero answer is how do we leave tonight showing that we are committed in at least some way to at least match what this Friends group. I'm not saying we're going to leave tonight saying we're committed to restoring the building. I didn't say that. I want to put on paper something that shows some effort that we as a city are taking this is basic responsibility. I mean, I could have gone into the details, like we red tagged it, we pulled the electricity out, we did all those things ourselves. and yet we're still not gonna pay it for it, to put it back? I mean, it's actually stupid. It's actually unbelievable that we're debating this. It's pathetic, and like I said, it's embarrassing.
Is there a way?
And happy Preservation Month.
Is there a way?
And if any citizens would like to step up to pay the electricity bill for the library or for any other building in this town, please do, and come up here, and we'll be happy to work with you.
So is there a way that we can rephrase your motion by adding something to the
I've asked.
intent that Frank said? Because I think what I hear is your motion is to
I said I'd withdraw it.
give, and I haven't withdrawn my second, so to give a clear signal that it is the intent of the city to work towards the preservation of this building. Is
No.
that, no, stronger?
No, because I know that, first of all,
Stronger?
I agree we're not gonna, make a commitment to fully restore the building tonight. That's not what I'm asking. I'm asking for the commission to come up with something that shows we are gonna take responsibility for just taking care of the building at all,
Well, let's make that.
okay? And I'm just basically asking the question, is there anyone here, since you don't like my idea on how to do it, I would have just made a motion to just pay the $5,000, that would have been simpler. But I appeased this group who said, we've raised the money for that set purpose. Why did they raise that money? Because they knew we weren't gonna do it. And so now, we're gonna walk away tonight without any obligation to this building. So do I bring it up at the budget committee meeting? Do I bring it up, because if we don't do it, at some mission now or at the budget meeting, then we go through 2 years with any line item for the Buena Vista House. By the way, which is the same thing that happened with Ermitinger House. And so this idea that there's gonna be this really great collaboration between the Friends Group and the same vision with the city with that building is ridiculous. Because I spent 10 years trying to work with the city to do that, and it's still a mess.
Is there a way to, help me out, Rachel, is there a way to make the motion say that it is the intent of the commission to continue to work with the Friends of the Buena Vista Clubhouse in the eventual preservation of the building through collaborative process as described by, well,
Here's what I
We need
think.
to commit to $5,000. If the Friends Group
staff
wants
time?
to come back to
Can it
us,
be
it
staff
can
time?
be whatever, I don't
Okay.
care. I want $5,000 from the city going to that building. If we find out later what it's for, or staff decides what it's for, or we donate it to the Friends, I don't care. But I want to leave here tonight with at least partial obligation that we are going to take care of our own building. It's that simple.
so you're asking for a commitment of that dollars, whether it be
I'm done with it.
real dollars, staff time and whatever, or in some way.
So if I may, Commissioner McGriff, one of the original requests from staff was, as we initiated the conversation at the work session, was looking at the initial request of reconnecting electricity and the hesitation of staff to reconnect the electricity without having a commitment from the commission on kind of a broader view of, this is one step, but once we complete this step, what's the next step? What's the next process? Is there a commitment from the commission to start along that path and to dedicate staff time, to dedicate resources when we're stretched a little thin on staff time towards this project? It's all about balance. And so to Commissioner McGriff's point and to Commissioner Rocky Smith's point, we will definitely work with the stakeholder group, with the Friends Group to identify what our phased approach should be. I know that we have a letter from the building official specifying specific things that need to happen in order to reopen the house as a public meeting space. So we'll use that as our template and identify a scope of work that is both supported by the city as well as by the Friends Group in order to move us forward to give you the data that you need in order to make a decision. There will be staff time that will be required, and I know that Commissioner Rocky Smith has a lot of experience in, historic preservation and what it takes to get from point A to point Z. And it is a little bit of a long haul, and there will be a commitment at some point that will be required by the city to move it forward. So we can start to initiate those conversations and meet on a more regular basis. We can make sure that we're putting down our work plan and identifying an appropriate phased approach, and we can commit to coming back to the city commission at a future date once we have those things lined up in order to make sure that you're comfortable with that direction.
So let me understand this. Do we already have defined what we need, what needs to be improved to remove the red tag status from that building?
We do.
Do we have an agreed upon cost associated with that between the Friends Group and the city?
We do not.
Not yet.
So would that not be step one, the minimum threshold?
Yes.
You had to- So let's set that as a goal, and let's not make it some nebulous date. How much time do we need to accomplish that? Can we do it in 6 weeks?
I don't think so.
Our work plan said it would be done by, we'd try to have.
I'm not saying complete the work, Damon,
No,
I'm saying,
No, the work plan was to have a costing, not to complete the work, but to get the costing work done by July 30th.
and this is the minimum level to remove the red tag.
Yes.
And then the second phase to that would be, we would like to bring the building to this state, and that'll be a second set of costs, which we can discuss separately.
Right.
So we say the first goal can be accomplished by,
Our goal is July 30th.
can you support that goal and make that happen by July 30th? I'm not familiar with the amount of the work. Can we do that?
I think it depends on our ability to find times that work to meet with the Friends Group, but if everyone's supportive of that, I believe we can do that from a
Which
staff
gets back to
perspective.
the key, so we can get people in there.
Yeah, but, I'm not sure that this, I mean, this is a red tag, this is an inspector, this is someone saying this doesn't meet our inspection, right? I mean, this isn't something we're coordinating on as far as what we like, the color of the building. We're
Right.
talking about occupancy and bringing it up to legal standards. So can we just tackle that one first?
I think as an example, I will state that, one of the things that was defined in the scope of work by the Friends Group was doing corner foundation for the building.
But is that the criteria of removing the red tag?
Providing an appropriate foundation to support the structure is part of the red tag. And so my conversation with the Friends Group is around if we are to identify that this is a house worth saving, this is a house worth spending possibly $400,000, $500,000, $1 million on renovations of the house.
And
does
that's
it make
phase
sense
2.
to do a full foundation if you're already lifting up the house and you're already completing that work, so to make sure that it's usable for the long term. So identifying the appropriate scope of work that works both for the city as well as for the stakeholder group. So not just put a Band-Aid on certain pieces, but knowing that if we're gonna have to invest a substantial amount of money in doing certain things, it makes probably a little bit more sense to invest just a little bit more to provide that extended longevity where we have a house that is usable for future generations and not something that we'll have to readdress in 30 years from now.
So you're saying rather than even do just the minimum, do them both at the same time? I want to know what it would cost just to overcome the red tag, what it would cost to achieve the ultimate goal. Is that what we're saying?
So
Is that what we're saying?
To look
Can we accomplish that by July?
Yeah, I mean, the amount, for instance, the estimations for pillars versus an entire foundation.
Certainly, there it
It's
is.
the same person doing the same estimate with the same measurements.
Okay.
So they would literally say pillars are X and foundation is Y.
Right,
It's
there
the
it
same
is.
visit, the same calculator, it wouldn't require multiple.
Understood. I've been in construction. I just want
So
to
there are small
clarify it and
things that
set
need
a
to be worked
direction.
out,
Right, Frank, so
which we can do.
the ultimate goal obviously is to have it be occupiable. That's not gonna happen in the short term. It has to be stabilized at this point so that other things can happen.
So people can be in there to perform the work.
Yeah, I mean, they can be in there
So
performing
that's
work too.
overcoming the red tag.
Right. My concern with, just so that Rachel understands, my concern with the red tag is that we have no documentation through our building department as to why the building was red tagged. We know that it has deficiencies, but our building official came to a stakeholder meeting that Phil helped us convene, and he can't find any records. So we don't know why it was officially red tagged. It's got the tag on there. We want to do whatever we can do at this point to get that off so that it is documented, because we don't know.
Well, it sounds like you two are saying two completely opposite things. The city seems to think that you know why it was red tagged and what the
Let's see
reasons.
the documents to show.
Well,
me.
regardless of why it was,
Yeah,
let's take the
it
current,
is.
let's take the current state of
It is.
affairs.
We
It's
wanna
red
open
tag.
it. If
And we
wanna-
do eventually want to open it. There's a lot of work that has to happen before that occurs.
Okay, so let's take it step by step. It was red tagged some number of years ago. We don't know the current state of the building. We need
We
to.
do know the current state.
We
of the
do.
building.
By whom? By
By-
an engineer or official that can say, here's what needs to be done to
We
remove the
have
red
that
tag?
from Mike. Mike and Todd Island have been in the building. They know
Okay.
what needs to be done. But again, there is no documentation as to why the building was red tagged.
Right, and if we want to open that box, which I don't think
We don't want to, we don't want to go there.
It'll-
So I think,
I just
But
wanna-
I think we're all kind of saying the same
Let me tell you
thing.
that I have a feeling why.
Well, I can't
and I
undo
would
the
love to
facts.
see the paperwork.
That's speculation, but I think we're all trying to say the same thing, that we want to look at a phased approach so that we can look at this as a whole, and it's going to have to be done piecemeal. So I understand that. I think the commitment of the city, if you want to put a dollar number on it, is the fact that staff has said that he will work with us
That's the
to
commitment.
do that, and that to me is.
With a due date.
That is a commitment. And I think, July 1, August, depending on people's vacations, I'm going to go wandering off again here in another few weeks to go somewhere else.
Well-
But that doesn't mean the other people aren't still here.
I guess that I want the vote on record of my original motion, and we'll see.
So I'm not so hung
Who
up on the
decides to take
$5,000.
responsibility of
I'm
this
looking
building
at it
tonight?
from the standpoint of that, whatever that quotation of $5,000, to me, that's staff commitment. So
This whole thing is a staff job. I don't know what we're talking about.
I know, so I'll call for the question.
Restate
the motion.
Sure, so there's a motion on the floor made by Commissioner Rocky Smith and a second by Denise McGriff. The motion was, if I understood it correctly, to earmark $5,000 in this upcoming biennial budget to go specifically towards the Buena Vista House.
Yeah, and my motion really is it sits in a fund in the Parks Department under Buena Vista House Maintenance. I don't know why that's a difficult thing.
It's not. It could be staff time, it could be this, it could be a lot of
Could be
things.
just
We're not
sitting
defining,
there,
we're not
earmarked
defining.
for the house. That's it. Call for the vote.
So I'm gonna call the roll now. Let's see, Commissioner Denise McGriff,
Aye.
Commissioner Rachel Lyle Smith,
No.
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
Aye.
and President Frank O'Donnell.
No, for the reasons previously stated. I agree with Damon. We get the estimates to overcome the red tag, concurrent with the estimates to bring it up to the
Minimums.
well, first we do minimums, and then what do we want it to be ultimately?
Okay, I would make that a motion.
By what date?
The date given,
July 30th,
July 30th,
2019.
2019. Good idea.
Somebody want to second it?
I'll second that motion.
That way
Am I
we
allowed
can.
to second that motion?
Yes, you're allowed.
You are.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and call the roll. So Commissioner Denise McGriff,
Aye.
Commissioner Rachel Lyle Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
Aye.
and President Frank O'Donnell.
Aye.
Okay, I have one more little motion on this thing. So one of the things that we discussed with Director Lewis is that he's suggesting that the local designation be put off till later, but there is an opportunity that is coming up by the end of July that I would like the organization to pursue, and I would like to request that we allow for the local designation of this building. My understanding is that Christina Robertson Gardner has all the information that is needed, and when we file for these applications for funds, we can say that that request is pending, and we have a better chance of getting this.
The reason I can't act on this, because I don't understand the full implications of it.
It's a local designation. It just basically says that the building is significant to the local community in Oregon City. And that's just a small first step in order for us to apply for some funding in this year's round. We have a good chance of getting it.
Can we bring this back? Can we bring this
With a
topic?
staff report
Yes.
that says the implications of it.
We can do that, yes.
The thing is that it's timely.
When do you need an answer?
I need it soon. The applications are due by the end of June.
Okay. Can we have that answer in a timely
I think
manner?
the local designation process is a land use process,
Yes,
if
it
I'm
goes to the
correct.
Historic Review Board.
So,
Correct, Carrie?
It is.
I've done it myself many times as staff.
can we provide that answer within the time period needed?
Well, we can provide the city with some
The implications.
outline of
Yes.
what the steps will be and what the implications are.
That's what I think.
We probably can't get through the land use process by the end of June.
But we
Well,
can be
there's a
in the
May
process.
meeting and there's a June meeting, so we could. If we were able to get the information in a couple of weeks, we could still file an application with the city.
We can put together
We
the
can- we-
materials and
Yep.
report back.
That's what we need to happen.
It won't be if this is, this won't make a work session, this will be at a commission meeting for that discussion.
I mean, if it's, again, I have to agree with Commissioner Smith, if this is important to us, we should designate it locally. We already know that it's significant. We've been told by the State Historic Preservation Office that it is important.
Well,
So I'm just trying to
And I
memorialize
believe
it.
that was from SHPO as a national
Well, yes.
register.
That's another topic.
No, and let me just be very clear. It's not that I'm not supportive
No, I
of this,
understand.
but I'm not willing to sit here and make some decision about something that you've provided no information on, that I don't have time to ingest everything and take the full scope.
I understand that
so-
it's in the purview of the Historic Review Board. They make the decision. I just want to get permission to file an application before them and let the chips fall where they may. If they say,
With an appeal right
Yes.
to the city
Right,
commission.
if they say
So
no-
it would be before the city commission, after the historic review board.
right, but I can't imagine anybody wanting to appeal it, but. So that's my reasoning, is that there's a separate quasi judicial body that deals with it. If you feel you need more information, then let's get the information so that you feel comfortable with it, because it's really a fairly simple process.
So what are you asking for?
I'm asking for permission to allow for an application to be filed.
Essentially,
With
you'd be
Historic
directing
Review
me to
Board.
sign the land use application as the representative for the city. As it's a city-owned property, so when land use applications are submitted, I sign on behalf of the city. So you'd be directing me to sign the land use application for the local historic.
And the city would review it
Designation.
before we submitted anything, so they could look it all over.
And it would still have to go through the hearing process.
I'm on unfamiliar
it's-
ground,
it's a
so what I
hearing-
need
it's
to
a
know
hear-
is what, does that?
it's a hearing
Does that
process.
have an accompanying obligation of any time that I'm not aware of?
And I think this is the kind of information I think that you're asking us to
Yes,
bring
it
back
is.
as to what the
Yes.
implications are. As well, at some point, the commission needs to decide what we want to do with this building, which I
Yes.
think is what you're trying to get by July 30th, to have a discussion, whether it's 1 phase, 10 phase, whatever that is, and what that financial commitment is that you are making as a jurisdiction and/or relationship with the Friends Group. So, the order of how that happens is up to this commission as the policy decision maker, whether you want to nominate it first and then figure out what the costs are, or if you want to wait till July 30th, then make a decision about what you want to do with the building and then start this process. Those are some of the things that we as staff are going to need direction on. We have clear direction on what to try to get done by July 30th.
Yes.
I get it. Again, it's a fairly simple process. I know that there are some concerns, but we're just trying to help the city meet its Goal 5 obligation. We are obligated under statewide planning goals to look at our historic resources and try to protect them how we can. I don't see that's up for debate. We have buildings in this city that are coming up on 50 years old that we need to be looking at now so that they don't get torn down. And the staff is doing that. They have done that. So again, I'm okay with us getting the information, coming back in a couple of weeks and making that decision, because funding is critical to this. And as much money as we can help raise to help offset costs, the better it is. That's where we're
And I
coming
agree
from.
with that, Commissioner McGriff. I want to give you that opportunity, that basis to secure that funding. It sounds like a fairly simple answer for the staff to say, these are the implications of proceeding forward. We're not, this half of the room is
Right, it's
not.
not, yeah, I understand. You're not in the land use want world like I am, and
No.
Rocky's been through it, and,
Right.
I know this backwards and forwards.
Do we have, are we clear?
I am clear that we are bringing back the process of the local designation
And its
As-
Implications.
And the implications of what that
Okay.
means.
And we are clear that
Positive
we.
and negative, please. Not just one side. Of course, it's
Yes,
all
ma'am.
positive to me.
And we are clear about the July due date with what we want to accomplish by that date.
And we're not giving keys to anybody?
We don't have an access question, we just haven't answered yes.
Yeah, I was going to come back to
Can we
that.
work
That
that
sort of
out
got
with-
lost in the
Can they
shuffle.
work that out with you, Phil?
Yeah, we can work with them on access, and to date, anytime they have requested access, we have never denied access to the facility.
We've had
I'm in
work
after
arounds and
hours,
dates,
we have
but-
staff that are here at 6 in the morning.
So it's been a non-issue in the past.
To date,
I
yes.
would disagree with that.
Well,
In my tenure with the city.
Well,
okay,
It
so
has not been an
we,
issue.
that resolves the
Been through the
final small
process.
issue.
Thank you, commissioners, for listening to this. You can tell there are two of us that are,
Well, we understand your historical bent and we're not
yeah, we're very passionate
opposed, we're
about
just
it.
trying to
it's really not
understand.
about history at all. It's about maintaining and paying the bills for our own building, regardless if it's historic or not.
Okay.
That's what I was asking tonight.
We've had the discussion. Are we on to the consent agenda?
We are on
we
to
have-
No, we haven't
legislation.
even
We have to
started
do
the
6A.
public hearing.
Yes, we have to do 6A.
What?
6A.
6A.
I've lost track.
We haven't
Equitable
lost track.
housing.
We're still here.
And I thought
We're
the
gonna
Buena
change-
Vista House was going to be short. 6A,
Change the
PC 19041.
So I think it sounded like that we were just gonna open the public hearing, take public comment, ask questions or provide direction to staff, and then potentially continue to May 15th if that's what the commission chooses to do.
That's a fair summary. We're going to take public comment and I don't believe we're going to deliberate for decision-making purposes, but if there's any direction or clarification, we'll take care of that tonight. So is there anyone, we have speakers signed up?
Yeah, there's 5.
All right, let's get on with the show.
So can you see them, or do you want me to call them, or
I don't-
George
I don't have
Thomas
the list
and
of it.
Nick Dirkman?
What, where? Oh, sorry, yeah.
And please,
Still
everybody,
struggling over the
speak to
last
the specific issues. That would be great.
Good evening to all of you. I want to thank you for having me here tonight. And God bless Dan Holliday. Hope he gets well soon. My name is George Thomas. I live at 16644 South Lizzie Road, Oregon City, Oregon. I was a little confused on a statement that was made at a few of the meetings. And a gentleman stated that the property had been voted on 3 times and failed 3 times by the voters. And then he went on to say that he was unfair, that he thought it was unfair that the governor passed a law that they could annex property in without the vote of the public.
Right.
And what I wanted to point out was that when this property come up for annexation, it was for the city voters. No outsider could vote on it in the urban growth area. And so I would say that the people who wanted this in the urban growth area could vote on it, it would have been voted in instead of out. I was just a little confused of the fact that what's fair and what's not fair. Being voted in and you can't vote on it, or where the governor can put it in. SB 1573 is a good law. It saves taxpayers money in the city and the commission, the city and county funding for, it takes a lot of effort to put this stuff on the ballot and stuff, and it saves them a lot of money. I think that's a good law, but.
Understood. So you started out with a question about them. Do you need the question answered about the fairness of the process?
Yeah.
And I would invite you to have a discussion explaining the difference between the state law and the city charter. And I understood you to say that the voters that voted on that were residents of the city, but not of the area about to be annexed. Is that correct?
Right, that's correct.
And that is the process. The voters, that the people that vote on are those who are about to assume responsibility for that piece of property.
Yes, when annexations go before the city, it's only
Okay.
those within the city that can vote, not others that are adjacent neighbors in the county or the properties within the county, although there's some property owner signature portions of that. We could talk more offline.
If you would care to meet with Laura and just have a further discussion and go through the details of it, Laura's willing to meet with you and just have a detailed discussion of how that process works, who votes, who doesn't, and resolving the city charter with this Senate Bill 1573.
Sounds good.
Okay, we'll do that. You're welcome. Sir?
I'm Nick Dirkman, and I live in Oregon City. And I'm here to talk about the warming shelters versus the shelters in general, and specifically around the fee that would be required for warming shelters. And
Can I stop you for a moment? Are you affiliated with any of the warming shelters or providers?
Nope.
You're just a citizen? Okay.
I'm a citizen.
All right.
I obviously, I'm involved in the coalition, but not, I represent myself. And anyhow, going back to the warming shelters, I know that the last 2 years that the warming shelters, the two that we have in Oregon cities, were approved by a emergency ordinance.
Correct.
So I know, and I have no idea, I mean, I don't know if there were any negatives about that or not, but the fact is that we did it 2 years in a row. No fee was charged. Obviously, the fee is what is of concern because $5,000 fee for warming shelters is an onerous type of fee that is really difficult for any of these organizations to deal with. And I guess from my own personal experience, I had an opportunity to serve at a warming shelter one night, February the 25th of this year. And I know that the people that were in the warming shelter, I suspect that they were from the general area of Oregon City. I don't think the warming shelters are designated basically on a daily basis, depending on what the temperature is outside. So I really feel like that night, I remember it specifically because it was snowing really hard at night. I served from 12 till 4 o'clock in the morning. And I know that we provided a service that really helped those people. And I don't understand why we can't designate warming shelters different from other shelters. And that's my
And
comments.
that will be part of the discussion. A lot of that has to do with the definitions that have been provided and the differentiation between things. And if you allow us to pursue that discussion, we intend to do that.
Okay.
And I'll make a comment. I'd love to see a more regional definition, an agreed upon definition of what these shelters entail, whether they be transitional or shelters or warming shelters, so that on a regional basis, everybody agrees and not just within the confines of Oregon City. And hopefully people can shed some light on that.
I mean, I know that there's a central coordination of the warming shelters through the county. I mean, because I've now gotten engaged in it and I get the notices about serving the help the warming shelters. And I think they have, it's pretty specified in terms of when they're open and when they're not open and that type of thing.
Yeah, that statement was, we understand the limitations on that because we voted on it to provide safety for those people.
Yeah, it's really
Okay.
important. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So I have Joey Bixler and Doug Neely. Joey? Joey.
I'm the substitute, Joey.
Did you change your name after you left the commission?
She needed a new identity.
Yeah. Joey was here for an hour and a half and she had to leave. So she gave me her written comments and I'd like to read them for you. Her name again,
You are
Joey
Nancy
Bixler.
Ide. Say who you are.
You are.
My name is Nancy Ide. I live in Oregon City and so does Joey Bixler Clifton, who I'm going to read her statement here.
Okay.
We can all agree that warming shelters are essential and may be the difference between life and death for a homeless person living outside in freezing conditions. It is imperative, therefore, that there be no barriers to having these important facilities. Under the present shelter code, transitional housing and warming shelters are placed under the same definition and are therefore required to pay the $5,000 fee with no guarantee that they have approval by the city. For a struggling nonprofit, this can be prohibitively expensive. I ask that you would consider having a separate definition for warming shelters that does not include any such fee so that more places will be able to afford the cost of sheltering the homeless. Last winter, it was reported that no lives were lost from exposure in the county because of warming shelters. Let's not be forced to change the statistic for next winter because of the lack of these shelters. Thank you.
Nancy, could I ask, because you're so active in that organization, is there a national or regional definition of those shelters that we can all agree upon? My hope is that other communities engage in the same life-saving ventures and ventures like we are.
Yes, in fact, it's actually in your packet. Pete Walter provided a definition for shelters. And actually, the coalition did submit some definitions, and staff took those and added to the list. And it's in here. HUD provides, Housing and Urban Development Federal Agency provides a definition for what they call emergency shelters. So it's in your packet.
I read those 3 definitions. I did not know the source of the definition.
Yeah, they really should have had a
Or a
source on it.
footnote or something.
I sent an email to Pete Walter to get some information from the Joint Office on Homeless Services from, that the City of Portland and Multnomah County uses, because I wanted to see something, a community that already has experience with this, and see how they define it, and he said he was going to make that available.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the one.
Oh, you have another 2 weeks to
Yeah, so
work
another,
that out.
just a question that I have that I want to just throw out there into the universe is, I understand people are concerned about fees, but as a devil's advocate question, it sounds like a lot of people are saying that there should be no review. And I'm a little troubled by that. I'm not expecting an answer, but I'm just throwing it out there. Yes, it's life-saving, but there's 2 sides to every coin. And in order for these facilities, wherever they are, whatever we're defining as, whatever they're defined as, there needs to be 2 sides of the story, because for every facility, there's a community that they're in. And I have expressed my opinion to Dan that the community has a right to weigh in as to how, who, what, where, and when. And I'm still looking at that, and for every person that comes and talks to me about the positive, I've got 2 people that talk to me about the negative. So somewhere or another, we need to find a balance, and that's what I'm interested in finding, is a balance. That's very important to me.
I would concur with that 100%.
May I comment on
Please
that?
do.
So it wasn't,
And
I'm
it
not
was the-
expecting an answer, I'm just throwing it out there to the
Okay.
universe so that it's on the table.
Okay. It is, the Homeless Coalition does not have a concern with a transitional shelter type of facility, or even any future day centers that want to open. Conditional use would be a logical thing to have the community's input, as well as a lot of other review. But the warming shelters are such a temporary, the use is different. And we're trying to separate that to help it to be known that the use is different. And I will address that in my comments in a few minutes, but they also do go through an extensive review with the fire marshal, and not necessarily the public, but the shelters have been completely open and forthright in wanting to communicate with the public on these things. So I can address that a little in my comments too.
Mayor Neely.
Yes, Commissioners, Mr. President.
Please.
I'm a resident of Oregon City, and I'm also speaking in favor of having it as a permitted use. The fact is, they're open so few days of the year, and to have an onus of a $5,000 fee required for that particular purpose, when it actually is serving a limited number of the community for a short period of time, I think that should be a fee that doesn't exist. I have another item that I want to discuss, and you may have already dealt with it, and that has to do with your ancillary dwelling units. If they're being assigned, if a request is coming in from a piece of property in which we have a house on the historic inventory list or a national historic, list of historic places, I think those should go through the Historic Review Board before decisions are made at this level.
It would have to be because it's new construction.
Okay, so, I mean, so if it's that's a requirement, that's fine.
Yes.
I just want to make sure that was the case.
Yes.
I can just clarify one thing real quick, is that Historic Review Board looks at the exterior of buildings and how they look. The use of an ADU itself wouldn't go to Historic Review Board. If there's construction, then it would, just to.
Yeah. He was talking about construction. That's what I was talking about, construction, not the use.
Yes.
We have a couple of them that they're not using them for residential purposes, but they've constructed a garage with a unit on top for office or whatever. Those, they were in McLaughlin and they went through historic review.
Thank you both. We have Mr. Tom Guile.
Oh, wait, yeah, do you? Yeah.
Nancy, are you stepping back up in your own persona now?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Am I with him? Okay.
I didn't know who I was
Okay.
talking to. Tom, you can join the party anytime.
I'll finish my notes I was writing.
There's a time limit,
Oh, okay.
remember.
Okay, good evening, Mayor, or Commission President O'Donnell and
Please.
Commissioners. My name is Nancy Ide. I live in Oregon City. And I'd like to summarize 3 important points that have been brought forward in previous testimony related to the proposed code on shelters, and more specifically, the warming centers. First, Oregon City provided 41% of the safe bed nights in warming shelters this past winter. That's 3,800 safe sleeps. The county reported 0 deaths from exposure throughout the county during this period. Second, the 2 warming centers in Oregon City reported to you of the financial burden that their nonprofit organizations would incur if a conditional use fee was required for their operation, and that in all likelihood would result in their inability to open the warming centers again this next winter. And third, the warming centers provided the opportunity for dozens of volunteers to serve in our community, as evidenced by the photos that were presented to you at the last meeting. I wish they could all be here tonight. Not only are the warming centers serving our homeless community members, but they give our neighbors an opportunity to serve their community by showing compassion and care to the most vulnerable people in our city. As you know, there is a homeless crisis not only in the metro area, but all of Oregon. Cities and counties all around the state are being faced with difficult decisions similar to what you're facing tonight and in the next couple weeks. As you complete your deliberations on various equitable housing policies, please remember the most vulnerable population of our community, those who are often forgotten and often needlessly feared. Make decisions to support the successful operation of the life-saving warming centers for those at risk without creating a financial burden on those organizations who are courageous enough to step up and help them. Create a new definition for emergency shelters and add it to permitted uses. Include the Planning Commission's well-thought-out recommended standards for shelters, which will result in community members coming together to discuss good neighbor practices. Warming centers will not end homelessness, but they are desperately needed while permanent solutions are being sought. Thank you for your time this evening and for your consideration in this important topic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. Tom Guile, Oregon City. I haven't planned on saying anything, so I have nothing prepared. Wanted to respond to some of George's comments. I believe that was the gentleman's name that came up earlier. He left before he had a chance to hear my comments. George has been at these meetings through most of those annexation attempts. He came in with Ken Ziegler many times. So he should have been aware of this by now, that, yes, I was the one he was referring to. It went down to defeat 3 times. 67%, 56%, then 62%. Indeed, the Senate Bill 1573 did make a difference in how that got voted in. And George lives on Livesey Road, and that's part of the area that's part of the concept plan. And I know that as soon as the annexation came through, one of those properties got listed for $1 million because they know that they're going to be able to get as much money as they want. George lives in that area. And of course, those people in Livesey want to make some money off their properties there. I mean, who wouldn't? A lot of people bought then before there was even an annexation plan in place. And yes, it's part of the urban growth boundary, but the voters here in Oregon City took into consideration over 3 elections the fact that infrastructure just doesn't come free. And the developers, even with SDCs, do not cover all the costs of infrastructures. The citizens have to pick up some of that out of the taxes they pay. So I think the voters were informed, they knew what they were voting for on those 3 times, and they would probably have voted no again on it if it had come up this time. But George is not done yet because Philomath, as far as I've heard, Philomath and Corvallis are still in the middle of a lawsuit with the Supreme Court. And I believe there's other cities that are also involved in that. I guess Oregon City didn't want to get involved. I think Dan didn't want to.
It might be
bring
a
our
future
commission.
topic.
Yeah. And so it's a different commission at a different time.
Yeah.
It will be a different.
The big thing is that a lot of people say, how could this have happened? And look at the expense to bring it to the ballot. Well, the developers really actually should spend some of that money to bring it to the ballot. I'm not sure if they already do. They're requesting of our city to be annexed into our city. So they should spend some of that money of the expense of getting these on ballots when they come up. However, it's not going to be on any ballot soon because of Senate Bill 1573. I'm sure George will get the information he needs from Lori, but I wanted to really clarify that when he was here, and I'm sorry he's not here to hear my comments. I was going to catch him, but he was on his way out. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
That concludes our speakers. Is there any, I know we're not going to deliberate. I don't think you need any additional direction. It was just taking testimony or.
We do need a motion to continue, don't we? We do.
Unless the commissioner has something they'd like to ask or tell us.
Commissioners.
Should we continue to, well, you have a question? Okay, I'm
Yes.
stopping.
So my question is, Ms. Turway, so in this summary of direction on significant code amendments to date, there's added comments of PC response, which is planning commission response that occurred based on their last meeting, correct? Where-
Yes, there is.
Yes.
There's a couple issues that you had sent back to the planning commission, and they have given us direction on those, on 3 of them.
And so I guess my follow-on question is there gonna be, some of these are kind of straightforward, about what their comments were, but like regarding the shelters, is there going to be more of a recommendation provided either by your department or by the planning commission as far as, a recommendation on, you know, the conditional use or the zones or whatever that's could possibly apply to these different types of shelters?
The city commission didn't send the shelter issue back to planning commission, although that is an option for you. The planning commission, as Commissioner McGriff can attest to, had a lot of discussion. This definition has been transitional shelter, it's been all sorts of things. And we have tweaked the language quite a bit. We can send it back to them if you would like more help. What we're looking for as staff, we'll talk about it next time, but we just need the directions. We have no shortage of definitions. We just want to know sort of the bigger picture of where you want to go, and then we can write those codes and definitions for you.
I know from me, having read the material for tonight, there were 3 definitions in there. I did not know the source of them. I'm hoping that this approach to homelessness and the other things is a regional approach, so that we are all using the same definitions, whether it's Oregon City, Milwaukee, Clackamas County, whomever. And I didn't know the source of those definitions because it wasn't footnoted. So if those are nationally or regionally recognized definitions, that's something we need to know. If those are definitions that we chose to define, my preference would be, is there some organization that on a national basis, this is what, just like what defines elderly, what defines these shelters. Because I'm hoping that other communities can join with Oregon City in providing these same services.
No, there is no one standard that everyone uses, but we did use the basis of like HUD definition for the existing shelter definition in the code. It's just that it got tweaked in order to communicate what it was for, that it was for warming shelters and all these other very specific things. We can give you more examples of definitions, but if you want to tell us, again, the general direction, if you want to pull out warming shelters or some other type of shelters, that will provide more clarity as to what that menu of definitions looks like.
When you say something is tweaked, I accept it as, a full-fledged definition. I almost would prefer the tweaking component to be like in parentheses and say this means.
This change from this
We
to
can
this.
do that. So for example, the definition for emergency shelter, we added on a last sentence that said an emergency is when the city commission passes a resolution that says there's emergency. So what we did is we tried to provide clarity to somewhat generic definitions so we can implement them well, but we can certainly specify.
And that's an Oregon City addendum to the base, that's an Oregon City addendum to the base definition.
Yeah.
Okay, see, that helps.
And then for like warming and.
Noted that would have been helpful.
And warming, yeah, I'm more than happy to tell
If
you
you
where
would.
they come from. The definition for warming and cooling shelter was based off the definition for a warming shelter that we used in the resolution before, the 33 degrees or less. The number above for a cooling shelter, 95 degrees, we just made up.
Sure.
I mean, we looked around to see kind of what people do, but there's no, this
Okay.
is such a new thing.
Are the other two definitions tweaked also?
So
Are they
the
standard?
One in our code, everything is, well, a lot of things are tweaked. The definition of shelter that's in our code now uses some of that HUD definition. We did hear testimony from Clackamas County and the coalition at the planning commission level, and that's how we came up with the shelter one, but it is slightly tweaked to, for example, not consider bed and breakfast inns / boarding houses, hotels or motels shelters. So we needed to sort of specify in the context of our code, this is a shelter and this other thing is not a shelter. But a lot of that definition does fall from that. Then we added the time limitation that the commission was talking about at the last meeting. That time limitation of 90 days was in a previous version of a shelter definition that the planning commission was kicking around. And there was a lot of discussion about the time limitation. The planning commission decided at that point, the purpose of the definition is to identify what a use is and not to regulate the amount of time that each person was within it, that they identified that there was some difficulty for us to regulate. But really, the whole point of this is to specify what a use is so we can look at the impacts of those use. And then, day shelter, again, we used the hours from the resolution that we passed when we did night warming shelters. So we'll be happy to provide more feedback of where this stuff comes from, but a lot of it's been organic over since July of last year.
And I'll say this, clarity of those definitions will be key to the decision-making. And again, my hope is that those definitions are almost universal, that they are provided either on a statewide basis, a county basis, agreed upon by cities. I really would like to see others join in the services that Oregon City has provided. And to do so, I hope that that we have some kind of consistent yardstick.
Is there a specific concern with any of the one definitions, or just you're looking to provide some clarity? of
We
where
didn't
they
know
come from?
what they were. What is the basis of this? Is this some national standard? Is it some state standard? Is it something that Oregon City has devised solely for Oregon City's use? And it somewhat appears that having been, quote, tweaked, it is.
Yes,
And,
that's true.
again, my hope is that this is not an Oregon City specific problem. It's a regional, national problem. I thought maybe there's some agency existed that defined these kind of things that we could all agree to. This is what one of these is for all of us.
Yeah, it's,
That's all.
the tweaking comes to how we apply it to our code, because that's where we have to modify it to make sure that it complies with our standards, or we're not calling something else that shouldn't be a shelter. But the core of them will specify.
Quite honestly, I don't care if you state the original and then underneath it show that as modified by Oregon City. I don't care.
Okay, and I should still keep this menu of different types of shelters?
And clarifying what a base standard is versus the Oregon City version.
Okay, so I'll take this,
Is that-
what's on here,
And then
and
if
then,
Pete gets those, since we got this continued, like I said, I asked him to see if he could get that information from the city of Portland by this meeting, but hopefully he can have that by the next meeting.
Yeah.
And they're identified, they came from
Yeah,
the joint house, the joint office on homeless housing, whatever, or it came from here, or it came from there, that, again, like I said, they have much more experience with this than this county does, and I'm real interested in seeing what they have to say.
yeah, we did reach out to a couple people there and make contact, but haven't heard back. They have more definitions because they have more types of
Of things, yeah.
shelters. There are many types of shelters. We've identified warming, cooling, day, and just a general category for shelters. There's also, depending on how specific you want to get.
There's some
We
pretty
can keep
specific
going.
statements in there. One of them is provide services. And, we talked about the Roosevelt House as one of the defining things about that was there's no services provided.
That
You
is,
know, it's like, those are very,
Well, they provide a service, they provide a room, that's a service.
yeah.
that's a great point. It was an item of discussion quite a bit at the planning commission level when we talked about definitions. And so we made sure that the definition of shelter does include ancillary services. There was a concern that if you have a shelter, it's often they'll have a dentist come by or something like that. Could those things happen within that umbrella use? And so within the existing one from the planning commission, it does talk about ancillary services to serve the people so they could connect with you, whatever social services or help
Yeah.
in any way.
Job placement, counseling, those kind of things.
Yeah, so
Okay.
those are kind of the ways that these were tweaked.
This is the discussion that we voted and approved not to have tonight?
Right.
No, this is just direction on what we're looking for.
Or it's been a discussion for the last 10 minutes.
Okay, then we'll conclude it and we'll
I think
move
we can
to,
move on. Are you ready for a motion?
yes.
I'd like to move that we continue this to date and time certain, is it May 15th?
Yes.
At our next regularly scheduled meeting on May 15th.
Second.
Commissioner Denise McGriff.
Aye.
Commissioner Rachel Lyle Smith. Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Aye.
President Frank O'Donnell.
Aye. So we come to the consent agenda.
We pulled one item.
You pulled 8C.
No.
Nope, I'm sorry.
8A. Yeah. So,
Can we go ahead and approve the rest of the consent agenda?
Yeah.
And then just have a discussion on that?
Certainly.
Okay, I would move that we approve the remaining items on the consent agenda, 8B, C, D, E, F, and G.
Second.
Call for the vote.
Commissioner Denise McGriff.
Aye.
Commissioner Rachel Lyle Smith.
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Aye.
President Frank O'Donnell.
Aye. So, discussion on item 8A, 19-276, resolution 19-11, approving the Fourth Amendment to the City Commission Rules of Procedure.
All right, so I want to talk about section 3. I'm gonna pull it up here. Section 3. And under,
Are you looking at the regular version or the red line version?
I'm looking at the red line version, yeah.
All right. I got both.
So the work session
Where am I
text.
finding it?
Section 2 is general rules, section.
Okay, under regular meetings, so section 3A. it states that all regular meetings will be adjourned at no later than 10 p.m. unless extending until no later than 11 p.m. My screen just went out. There it goes again. Back on. Okay. If it's unanimously agreed upon by the commissioners present at the meeting, I propose to change that to all regular meetings will be adjourned no later than 10 p.m. unless extending until no later than 11 p.m. is agreed upon by the majority of the commissioners present. And so I would make that recommendation.
Discussion on the recommendation?
I support that. So you're talking just basically a simple majority? Is that what you're talking about?
And so I'll add to that in saying that this is the rules of the commission as a whole, which specifies the mayor as a commissioner. And therefore, the issue that happened at the last meeting where we had a staff presentation that would have probably taken 10 minutes, one individual of the commission decided that that was not an option. And instead of having that a discussion with the commission as a whole, I don't think any one commissioner should have that control. And so therefore, I feel like it needs to be changed.
Do we need to vote on these individually, Tony?
If I make an individual motion, that was mainly for discussion. If there's not support for it, then I wouldn't make a
support
motion.
it. I just want, I'm ready to move on, but I don't know how anybody else feels.
I support it. I just, it seems, I don't know, maybe out of line for us to be discussing the roles and rules of the commission without a full body of our commission actually here. I mean, granted, I know we absolutely can and move it forward.
I don't mind them withholding it till the next meeting.
I think we can do it, and I just wanted to get it done.
I don't mind proceeding on it. I feel that if we need to elongate a meeting to get to, I'm not even sure when, maybe 11 o'clock is a drop dead hour, but I don't even, most times we won't even have to do that. We just need to resolve what business we have.
Well, it states not till, it says 11 is the
Not later than. I'm fine with it, with moving forward on that.
So you could either take that one issue or propose to approve the entirety with the amendment.
There's a second issue that
Yeah,
we want to
I have
discuss,
one more
which
in
is
that.
taking testimony.
I have one more in that section.
Go ahead, Commissioner McGriff.
On section C, we had asked staff to come back with some language regarding work sessions, and I don't remember us saying that we would allow public testimony to be agreed upon by a majority of the commission present, that the testimony, I think what I felt was that the commission may allow testimony from the public at a work session, which will provide additional information, expert testimony, or professional opinion that will inform and educate the commission about the work session topic. I did not want to make it, what I heard was that we were going to open these sessions up for limited 3-minute information. And we were not going to do it on a piecemeal basis like, okay, well, today I feel like it and tomorrow I don't feel like it. I think that if we're going to do it in fairness to public participation, we need to just open it. And we can limit it. People can get cut off, saying, sorry, your topic is, you're testifying, you're lobbying, it's not information. I think we can reasonably do that, but I want it to be known to the public that we are going to allow for participation by the public at work sessions.
Can I,
Yes, sir.
I don't want to play devil's advocate here,
No,
but
it's
if one
okay.
person believes it's advocacy and one person believes it's fact, how do you resolve the issue?
Well, that's for us to decide, because that's what we talked about. We were very specific about information. So when somebody starts saying, well, I want you to do X or blah, 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 to me, that's not information.
You're not saying open public comment, though. You're saying keeping this language about a specific work session topic.
Yes, specific work session topic, not the world. So if somebody comes up and wants to tell us about widget X because we're considering purchasing widgets, then I would be interested in hearing information from the public about this particular widget. Not that whether we should buy it or not, but maybe they have some factual information that I don't know because I'm not a widget expert.
So the only clause you're removing is if agreed upon by the majority.
Yes, that's what I'm suggesting.
I don't know how you remove that.
Well, isn't it implied by, if the commission may allow testimony?
Yes, it may.
And if the commission's going to, or it's not, it's gonna take a majority to decide to
Exactly.
do that.
So it doesn't
Exactly.
need
So
to stay
I'm not sure that it makes much difference if the language is there or not.
Got it.
Sorry.
I was relying on the may. That said we may. It doesn't say we shall, it says we may.
Well, I understand what the attorney is saying. Commission as a body as a whole, 3 votes. A consensus carries
Okay.
the motion. So it's almost, as you said, doesn't need to be stated.
You're not voting at work session.
You're not voting at work sessions.
Right,
And
no.
I mean, it seems to me that you're gonna spend more time determining whether or not something's factual information or if it's persuasive argument than just either hearing testimony or not hearing testimony.
Right.
I mean,
Information.
So does
So I'm
this,
just throwing it out there because I look back at what we had talked about and that's kind of what I saw. So I'm just throwing it out there.
I was just trying to provide a little bit of clarity
I
on
appreciate
how, and hopefully, I dread that you're gonna be up here trying to figure out who you wanna hear from and who you don't,
Right.
and how you're gonna resolve that if there's a disagreement.
Yeah, because I think the idea was we wanted limited testimony,
Exactly.
right?
Yes, limited. 3 minutes, that's it.
No, I meant limited by who.
Right, and I
Versus
don't know how
opening
you
it up to the
decide
whole-
who
Yeah.
without hearing, sorry.
Right.
Yeah, see, I didn't want to have to pick and choose because that's unfortunately what I feel has happened in the past. Well, I'll hear from you, but I won't hear from this person. And I don't think that's a disservice to the community. And I've heard that voiced at CIC.
so you feel that, say we're here and we're getting redundant input, do you feel the chair should say, sir, you're repeating what we've already heard? Do you have new information?
Usually the chair will say, if you're saying the same thing that somebody else is saying,
Right.
just say you agree and, move on. And again, like I said, it's the widget. I'm interested in knowing does this widget work at 65 miles an hour? Or does it work at 85 miles an hour? Maybe the staff doesn't know. And this person out here in the audience is a widget expert and they know about that. I want to know that.
Yeah, but we're not gonna be able to discern, though, what that person has to say when they come up, if they're actually providing factual information, or if their plan is to get up there and say, I just don't like this, and I'm gonna spend my 3 minutes on my soapbox.
Well, we're explaining it's not a soapbox. They can do
Well, you
that
can
at a
explain
public
all you
hearing.
want, but.
That's right. I'm fine with language as is. I mean, it's gonna be an experiment in management
Absolutely.
regardless. I think as a courtesy to each other, if you had something that you wanted to hear, I certainly would
Okay.
concur with that. I'm not troubled by that language. It's an experiment that may end up being reworked.
And yeah, it may, I just, again, like I said, my only reason for bringing it up is I want to, again, be supportive of public input. It's what the goals are for the CIC. It's to me, it's one of the cornerstones of local government. So and I've got the chair of our CIC sitting there, he's nodding at me, so I'm just.
Well, how does the CIC accept public input? They don't have a vote of their group that says,
No, you can come in and.
just come in and speak.
Yeah.
You can talk to them, and Rachel's our representative.
So do we need that phrase in there at all? I mean, it's a grand experiment with or without that phrase.
Yeah, I don't think we need the phrase of majority of the commission. And it sounds like we don't need the may allow. It sounds like it's gonna be the commission will allow
Well, we
public
may-
comment.
We may allow. Mr. Chairman, may I, Amy, do you have any comment on this? If I may, if you
You
could
are being
indulge me for a
invited
minute.
to testimony.
Yeah.
To tell us about,
Speak as Amy
invited, to
Wilhite,
tell us
not
about
as
invited
the whole.
testimony.
But public comment has been a bane of the CIC since the get-go. But when I became chair, I was adamant that we accept public comment. We've had to tweak it back and forth, whether we allowed public comment on presentations, because what we didn't want to have is somebody comes, it's just giving information, and have someone bash that poor person that we invited to come talk, so we've had to play with, also, we didn't want it to be a come and express your concerns that we have no jurisdiction on, or would we even take a stand? And so we've had to play with it, but I'm all about public comment. Again, if you say it's informative, I think, and the night itself, you're not voting on anything. You're just gathering information. And so, like you said, they have the opportunity. So I don't think, and most of the things that come up at work sessions don't appear to be what the public, I don't think you're gonna pack a room with people that wanted to talk about,
X, Y, or Z.
the school building, Ogden, for instance, that you had recently. I don't see it being a big issue. I'm all about public comment when it's appropriate, especially if it's a work session. I think if you leave that information, I like that language without the majority, because you don't want to vote. What are you going to do every night? Are we going to take it tonight or not?
Yeah, I don't want to go
I
through
think the
that.
chair
That's my
needs to
opinion.
control it. I mean,
Yeah.
we've specified what we're looking for. Additional factual information, expert testimony, or professional opinion that informs and educates. We don't want to be lobbied, as we said before.
Exactly.
We don't want 20 additional redundant opinions. We already heard that. Help us help you. And
Exactly.
if that means the chair has to say, excuse me, sir, that we've heard that very information, do you have additional information above that to offer? And that's what's going to have to happen.
But if somebody like Rocky came in and they were doing something and he had information from 20 years ago that no one else
we
knew,
wanna know
that'd be
that.
perfect,
Yeah, we do want to know that.
Yeah, and it'd be great to get it that night, so you have it all together, not all of a sudden when it gets moved to a regular meeting and you're gonna vote on something and some brand-new idea came up that would have been nice to know.
Let's not quibble over small things. Let's just,
I'm fine allowing it.
you want to remove it,
Yes.
I'm fine.
Okay.
If it turns into a problem, we
Then
can always change it.
Exactly.
Right, that's
But
it.
let's make it broad.
But I think we want to have that capability. And
We
open
have
it up, so,
options.
yeah.
We have options.
Are we done with that?
Did you have anything
Well, you need
else?
a motion.
Motion and a second,
Or do we want to wait till the full commission's here? Do you feel like we want to do that?
I'm prepared to move on it tonight.
I'll
I mean, it's
move.
something that this commission, that by majority wants to do.
Is there
Well,
anything
I was
else?
just throwing it out as something to consider, but if everybody
Is there
feels
anything
comfortable
else that we
with
want to change in here? Besides those two things?
Not that I see.
Okay, well, I'll move that we adopt resolution 1911 with the changes as noted. Is that the right statement?
Yes.
I'll second.
All for the vote.
Commissioner Denise McGriff,
Aye.
Commissioner Rachel Lyles Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
Aye.
and President Frank O'Donnell.
Aye.
So can I ask a question? So, President O'Donnell?
Yes, please.
So there were some other conversations about the commission rules and policies and stuff, and one of those was, I think the city was gonna ask some of the other commissions about the start time of meetings. Can you give an update on, is that something that's still coming back to us, or?
My understanding is that we're gonna do, so planning commission starts their public hearings at 7 o'clock. They do have their work sessions
Right.
earlier. Historic Review Board does the exact same thing. We're gonna do a better job of noticing it on the Historic Review Board page, because it's like starts at 6 and and it's one agenda that rolls into the hearing, then it's 7. So they do work sessions at 6, hearings at 7 as well, so it should not be an issue.
I think what you were telling us before, you were going to, like you said, you were going to clarify it so that it's
When we
really clear.
checked with staff,
Yeah.
that's how we've already been doing it that way.
Okay, because they used to start at 6 o'clock.
So I think that was a change to some rule somewhere.
There is a policy that's being updated, but we haven't updated that. And
Okay,
when
so
we
it's
do,
coming
we
back
will.
to us.
Yep.
Okay,
Thank you for remembering that.
that was my item. That was.
Yes. No, I concur with you.
Yeah.
It needs to be consistent so people don't, now, does this one start at 5:30 or is it 6 o'clock or what?
Yeah. Okay.
It's just,
Thank
you know,
final items of the evening. Mr. City Manager, do you have anything for the good of the order?
Two quick updates. Well, first one from Mr. John Lewis.
So we got just some pictures of the stairway, stairway.
Yeah.
Stairway to heaven.
You do have slides?
Singer, yeah, we do
All
have
right.
slides, yeah,
See 'em.
so, I'm looking anxious, I'm anxious to show them to you, so,
We're anxious to see.
Hey, some scenic rocks.
Phil's holding the keys. So, really, they're just pictures. These are the rocks that fell, I want to say it was Wednesday, the 14th or 15th. Well, I was actually away from the city when
Can we
this
use these for
happened.
any landscaping in the future?
Yeah.
You know, we have lots of scenic rocks around the city. We might as well have some more scenic rocks that we could use for landscaping or barriers or, you know, put them to use.
Yeah, oh, they are, you're right, it's beautiful Oregon City basalt. And we have a little more than we want right now. These are no longer on the pathway, but,
Good.
I just kind of wanted to show, is that not moving? Oh, this is, can you click one ahead for me? So just an indication, one more for now.
They could
And
be
then,
chipped for
so
souvenirs.
we've incurred some damage already of the stairway, the railing, and some of the pillars that hold those railings in place. And a little couple rock chips along the stairway as well. So this is a challenging little spot for those of you that are familiar with the pathway. In order to kind of take a better look at that, we hired a contractor who comes in and does some rock scaling for us. They're similar, ODOT uses these folks all the time. We've used them on Singer Hill when we had rockfall there, and they're typically along 99E where we have rockfall in the ODOT right away there. So they came and they reviewed some of the existing area where those rocks fell out. We didn't, we asked them to kind of limit their search of kind of problem areas, and this is real close to the areas where those rocks fell. And there's some pretty massive blocks of rock that are interlocked. They were at one point one big piece of the whole bluff, and they've kind of through just some tree roots that have kind of grown in there. I've got a couple of pictures of those. They're very unstable, and they sit quite high above the pathway. So we asked the contractor for different solutions, and they do a lot of work in the gorge area, especially along Multnomah Falls. And they came up with a couple recommendations, and it is the problem with the solutions that they've recommended are that's such a tough spot to get to, right? You can't drive a pickup close to this or get heavy equipment in the area. And so I've got a drawing that shows up eventually, but there's just some tree roots that are starting to push on that. And we know those rocks need to come down. And so we're looking at options for how to do that. And when you start thinking about how to build things like rockfall fences and the kind of things you would typically see, or secure the rock screening to the bluff like you see along 99E, very, very costly and complicated, and a lot of that material is special order. Right now, the pathway is closed, so, we think that's the right thing to do, just to have some public safety there, but this was their first solution. They quoted this at $130,000 worth of fencing for about 40 feet of fencing that would likely be damaged when we remove the rocks. And I think the profile there is a little bit of an exaggeration, but it's kind of representative if you think about the bluff up there. And I know you probably haven't been down there since we closed the path, but we're welcome to give you a tour if you'd like. In fact, tomorrow,
I'm not saying anybody's been down there. I don't know if anybody.
there's a really good opportunity tomorrow for you to get a close view of that. Because rather than this option, we're considering a little different option. All options have risks associated with, and I would say risk to property damage, not risk to worker safety, but have risks. we're gonna be hauling down the stairs somewhere between 200 and 250 bales of straw, and we're going to stack them in amongst the area just below that rock outcrop. And that effort is really all about trying to preserve the stairway. And then work with the same rockfall contractor to, basically they pry, and they've got some special airbag equipment that they stuff into those voids, and the idea would be to push the rocks from the bottom out first so that they land. And I think typically people think of them as bouncing balls and roller and that they're just going to roll down the hill. We're kind of hoping that doesn't quite happen like that they land and settle. But we're going to see. And so the good news is I go on vacation tomorrow, and while this happens, I'll be away.
Tony's in charge of the
Tony
straw bales?
Tony is going to be at the base of the hill there.
Hauling the straw bales down. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Way to go, Tony.
No, tomorrow straw bales go down. So and I'll be here for that.
So that means that the stairs are not going to be accessible.
They're not going to be accessible, and we're really not scheduled to do that. There's other dilemma, which is obviously there's railroad grade that's on the bottom side of this. There's also, if you've noticed, there's tall PGE power poles along the railroad grade, and those most of those tie back to the bluff, and some of the tieback wires happen to be right under, of course, where this rockfall is. So. We've got quite a coordination effort, and Vance Walker's kind of leading the charge on that with the street crew and help from Parks. So we're all gonna kind of lend a hand to get the bales in place. And then on May 9th is when the stars align, and we'll have Railroad, PGE, Rockfall Contractor, Public Works, Parks will all kind of be not in harm's way, but there as needed to, if the rocks come apart and they land on the bales, and we've got to break those up further, dealing with those kind of things. So that's where we're at with that project, and Tony asked me to give you a little update, and that's my little update.
Have elevator hours been modified at all?
That's a good point. Thank you for raising that. So yes, the elevator hours have been modified, so we want to make sure there's coverage there. Sometimes when we have breaks at the elevators, they stop elevator operations, so we've asked that not happen while this closure is happening. And then we've extended the elevator hours, and I'm not going to remember exactly the time, but I think we opened them a half hour earlier than we normally do, and we stay like an hour later. So.
How is it blocked? I mean, there was originally, I saw barricades. I haven't walked down there. So is it blocked off so people can't get through the barricades, or is it more permanently fenced off? So
Yes,
that
when we first blocked it off, it was
people were just
some
going
type
through.
2 barricades,
Right.
and now we've brought the type 3s up there, and I think we've chained them in place.
Okay.
Tried to make it a little more, I mean, if you're a climber, you can get around them.
Right.
But, and we've tried to denote that closure so that people aren't going too far off path just to get there.
So you'll be toting the barges and lifting the bales, so to speak.
Hopefully no barges.
Sorry, I
We
couldn't
don't need
resist.
floodwater
You don't
here.
get to use that statement very often in discussion.
Okay,
Next, we have a quick update from Chief Band.
I have some pictures too.
Ooh.
Not near as many.
John have been hanging out.
So, where's my picture? Okay, so I'll start with this, and then I'll kind of talk about some of the other things that are going on. The first topic is just about we've talked a little bit about what do we do in terms of telling the story of the school, and everything from, I think architects kind of want to do some sort of an interpretation of something from the building, but talking to several people, one of them, Commissioner Smith, we really thought that some relics, some tactile, actual things from the building needed to be preserved somehow and incorporated into the new site. And we focused on these details that I think architecturally, the most notable thing about that building is that entry. So we put the architects, kind of gave them some ideas and then put them to work. They came up with some drawings about how we could take that noticeable window that's up above that door and to bring it down kind of to eye level. A lot of people have walked under that, but probably never been able to walk through it. And so this plaza or courtyard, whatever you end up wanting to call it, that eventually would connect a police department and city hall. That will be something, that actual window will be something that people will be able to look through. Our plan is to put, you can see in the lower left, the from the building that the plaque, and then on the back, or I even think on the right there, you can see on the bottom, telling the story of the school that's there now, but also telling the history of, there was a cabin they held school in before they built the school that's in the white picture. So just kind of using that area to tell the story of the Mount Pleasant site. I think this is just obviously a rendering, and we would have sidewalk around the back of it to utilize that space in the back for some storytelling, probably on the bottom, and maybe some pictures on the back. And then the glass there would be covered by some sort of thick glass or plexiglass, so it could not get damaged. And then this is sort of an overhead view of what that plaza will kind of look like and its relation. That sidewalk would kind of tie in down to Laura's building and make it at least interesting walking over that way. And then Commissioner Lyles, you had asked kind of about flagpoles, and we were going to put all three there. And I think we had talked to them about 45-foot flagpoles, and I think they're a lot more expensive than 40-foot flagpoles. So
They are.
we're going to get 40-foot flagpoles. And then this is kind of a view looking into, you'd literally be walking into, that's your commission space that you'd be seeing there. And
Before you change.
yeah,
I don't want to try to design this, but having that feature just isolated there seems to me that it could be incorporated into a plaza where you could be not only looking at it and thinking about it, but it could be contemplative, and you'd have places to sit. So it's not just sitting over there in the grass by itself, but tie it into a place where people are gathering or visiting, because, I can see people coming back to visit Mount Pleasant School and wanting to do photo ops there or have some sort of a gathering there, and it's kind of hard to do that on a lawn.
yeah.
Where you're on a pathway going to and from, but not to distract from the building, but use some of the bricks to make a little plaza.
Yeah.
That's part of the school, tells the story of the school.
I think that is a great point. One of the things we did discuss is at least the orientation. I think when people drive down Lynn,
Closer to the
they
entrance.
should be able to still see that window the way they can now, so not facing it the other way, but it could certainly be up. I think there's a conversation about how close to Lynn it could be, because it really could be right by the sidewalk, but would it be more prone to vandalism there?
Not close to the
So
sidewalk.
I think that, and sort of, we can still kind of change how that plaza looks. And then well, I won't go too much into that. This is the entryway, and I just want people, one of the cool things about this building is it's going to be made with cross-laminated timber. And the cool thing about it is it's structurally, it's what makes up the building, but you also don't have to cover it to make it pretty. And so you're gonna see that wood on the ceiling and the wood on the walls. It's gonna be very warm throughout the whole building. The glass, there is gonna be shades so we can cover the front and back when need be. And then this is kind of a side profile of what that commission space is gonna look like. And it's not, those are big guys. So it makes the room look a little smaller than it is, but
There's one right above.
it's
where
like
the
a
chairs are.
Bigfoot. So some of the, I just wanted to update you, there's a lot that has been going on, and I'm just gonna kind of go in order. We did have the entire design team meet specifically we've had open houses where everybody was involved, but we did go meet with the Rivercrest Neighborhood Association on March 21st, had our entire design team there. And after we talked about the bluff, we talked about the project. They had their storyboards there and went through the entire process with them about kind of how the design of the building came about, the input that came, showed them pictures of the site, talked to them about what construction's going to be like and noise and those sorts of questions that the neighborhood's going to have because the construction's going to be going on, to neighbors there. Everybody was really excited about the project. They loved the aesthetic of it. I think they kind of liked the scale of the building, that it wasn't some big square box that kind of dwarfed everything around it. And overwhelmingly, they were pretty excited about it. In terms of the actual project, design development is done, and we have started between the contractor and the architect. They're sort of refining documents, starting, the planning process has started. And so what they do is we have an idea of what our budget is, and the budget and the drawings start, as they further develop the drawings, some things become less expensive, some things become more expensive. I don't want to say that our budget is looking like it's going to track right on, because that could jinx us, but that might be happening. Things are really looking good, and I think that all this planning is leading to in a pretty tough time to be building. I think there aren't going to be any surprises, but we haven't dug into the ground yet. We're planning on going in front of the Planning Commission toward the end of June. We are going to be sending some information to you about your availability for Thursday, June 27th, to do an event that would kind of be two things. One, to be a groundbreaking for construction, and at the same time to do an open house to the community where they could come in and take a walk around the school, maybe take some pictures, or kind of appreciate the school and take a last look before the school ends up coming down. The school is school's there now. They're done about the third week of June, and our window is, we don't have a ton of time from school getting out to demolition starting. Our kind of target is to, assuming all the planning stuff goes okay, to have all the site work and everything done before the rainy season.
That could be any day now, though.
I know. And the last thing, I'll answer any questions. You, Commissioner McGriff, had asked about architectural materials, and I think other people had in the past. I talked to the architectural team about that and the contractor, and basically once they're on site, we will walk through the building and figure out what we can save, what we cannot save, some things that people think you can save, like, well, why don't we take all the brick and just knock all the mortar off? I can imagine how much money you would spend having people sit and chip mortar off. So we will save some of that stuff, but we will be balancing what we can save and what is just cost prohibitive to save. We have had some questions, like the school that is leaving there has asked, they're moving into a church and doing some construction. They're asking us if they can take the doors because they don't have money for doors. So that's kind of where we're at. If you have any questions, let me know. Yes, ma'am.
Frank, may I ask a question? So the question is really kind of for you, Jim, and Tony. I am a huge proponent of reuse. I do not know if the city has a policy, and if we don't, we should, because I do not want to see a bulldozer going over there, smashing everything, and it all end up in a landfill. We need to look at deconstruction, if we can do it, and salvage as much of the material as possible, and if there's ways to reuse it in the building, we should reuse it. Everybody else does that. It's big in the Portland metropolitan area. I just had an opportunity to participate in a process with the Roosevelt High School redo. They used about 30% of the existing material and put it back into the school for different purposes. Some of it was, floors, some of it was this, they repurposed windows. I'm not saying that this building has to look old, because I'm not into that, but again, as a city, we need to be setting an example that you don't just come in with a track hoe and you just smash everything, because we can't afford the landfill. We can't afford to keep building landfills to put building materials in. There is embodied energy in that building that needs to be repurposed, as opposed to the embodied energy that we're gonna have in all this. We're never gonna get the energy savings out of it, because some of this is new material, and all of that counts. Other jurisdictions, particularly Portland, have a policy about trying to adaptively reuse. If somebody else can use it, that's great. It doesn't mean we have to, but us having our contractor put this in the landfill, I think is just not acceptable as a community. We just can't really afford to do that. It costs a lot of money to have stuff hauled over to Arlington. So I'm just throwing it out there, because in any project that we do as a city, we should be thinking about that specifically, to set the example for the rest of the community. Don't throw it away if it can be reused by somebody, maybe not us, but somebody else. Which was why I was asking you about the windows. Can they be taken out and repurposed for somebody else? Maybe we can't use them, but they don't look like, I was over there and they don't look like they're in all that bad a shape. And
I think
if the architects haven't thought of this, I'm shame on them.
No, they have, but
Okay.
what the information that they've given us is, this comes up a lot. So a couple points. This building has been designed, every detail has been designed, and reusing things like windows, that is not a part of the
No,
design.
I'm not saying we would reuse them. I'm
Okay.
saying somebody else could reuse them, rather than them going into the landfill.
Yeah, architectural salvage for someone else.
And there's tons of companies out there that do this stuff, and,
So that the constraints will be, how expensive is it for us to, like the windows? How expensive would it be to have somebody pull those out? Who wants them? Can they reuse them? Is there a market for reusing them? Those will be
And
when
scheduling.
we do
The
that
re- the
walk
rebuilding
and
center.
schedule.
they have a huge warehouse. I can't tell you how many pieces of stuff I've gotten out of their facility to use in my own home and have recommended to other people. Again, in the long term, it is cheaper than us paying a contractor to dump it in a landfill.
Yeah, we're gonna do everything we can. I'm just telling you what the constraints they've said in terms of something like the brick.
I
So you can save all the brick, you're just gonna have to pay somebody to chip all that was just kind of,
Well, maybe we stash it away someplace else for another purpose. I mean, we've done that with trees, we've got lots of landscaping boulders around that we've used for, we might not use it today, but we've got basalt that we can use for our promenade project or other projects where rock walls are falling. I'm just saying, again, if we don't have a policy about reuse, we need to get one. We just can't afford to send everything to Arlington. And I've seen so many houses and buildings in Portland where a track hoe comes in, crash, boom. It ends up in a drop box. It's just, I can see people in the community, saying, why are we not setting a good example?
I know there are some things that are already marked in terms of timber of certain sizes.
Like you're saying the
and-
doors, if they can use
Yeah.
them, that's perfect. We don't have to dispose of them. Because eventually we're paying the cost, even though the contractor wrote it into their bid, we're paying for that.
Do we have any other questions of Chief Band?
Can I,
Go ahead, sorry,
can I
Rocky.
see the front entrance again, please? Go back
Yes.
there.
By the way, I did bring this up at the very first open house
One
we had
more
about
pass.
this.
One more, all right. So from this view to the concept, I'm assuming that the concept for the archway or the window in the plaza or wherever it is, would also have lighting, and yet those light fixtures are not on it.
Yeah, the lighting that they have is LED. And this rendering, I got this afternoon, I've been bugging them, but they're super busy right now. but I wanted this in front of you. And so this is the first shot at this. And I had the same, you can see
Those light fixtures need to be on
they
that.
put
right?
those light fixtures in this on purpose,
Right.
but I have not seen where they're at here, and I haven't had the opportunity to
They
ask
need to
them.
be on, they need to be on that on either side.
Either that or somewhere inside so they don't get damaged. That would be my.
They're pretty cool
concern.
lights.
Yeah, I know they
That's
are.
a possibility too.
Pretty cool.
I just want to thank you for that. As someone who went to Mount Pleasant and is like, the angst of tearing down that building is huge. But the overwhelming excitement for a new police department outweighs it.
about souvenir
It's the
bricks for
two,
the alumni?
you know, two topics that I'm so tied to. It's very, so I just want to thank you for the effort that was made to preserve history. Because I think that effort's being made, and I appreciate it. And I can leave here tonight happy knowing that some of us are doing that.
Thank you. I was nervous about you liking that.
I like it, I just think that it's kind of an isolated spot, and it could be.
I agree with that,
It
but-
could be purposed into a really cool, like, plaza.
Are there any other questions of Chief Band?
No, but I did want to ask Tony, do we have a policy about deconstruction?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Can we get one?
If the commission would like to,
It would be at the direction of the commission, right?
We could ask Mike to come up with something, because again, we gotta do this.
I'm sure we don't have to invent one. There's probably ones we can plagiarize or copy and see what it says and then consider them.
I do have one more question, I'm sorry.
You can have.
So I assume that the June, it's 27th, is that solid or?
It's a
pretty-
Thursday.
Yeah.
It's a day you don't have, there's not a commission meeting that week.
Okay.
We're bumping into the 4th after that.
It's not concerts in the park.
Yeah, it looked like a good date, but if we have to do it another
Okay.
time,
Oh,
we can.
That's fine. The question is connected to another concern I have. Do we know the day that the building's coming down? Or the week that the building's coming down?
No.
Okay.
Not yet.
So what my assumption is gonna be, because, you know, it might happen, are we prepared for, because I assume this June date is to kind of appease people, see the building,
Say goodbye.
kind of say goodbye. But I will tell you, when that building starts coming down, there will be people there. And so are we prepared for people being on that site, you know, in a place that's safe or not allowed or whatever are we prepared for a crowd to show up when they start seeing that building coming down? You know,
That's a
because
good,
I think it's
like an
possible.
observation area would probably be a good kind of, that's a.
I just think we should think about
Yeah.
it, or at least have a plan in place for what happens if these people show up, because I think, you know, as much as we go over this, people are gonna drive by that day and go, oh my God.
Heck, yeah.
And they're gonna stop, and they're gonna
say,
get out of
"How
the
come
car.
I didn't know about this?"
And I know that will happen, and so I think we need to be prepared for the assumption that that could happen. Are we prepared on site for those people to deal with people showing up to see the building go? You know, safety wise and everything, I think we really need to be careful. We need to know
That's a
about
great
that.
idea.
Yeah, I
So
think
that's
it's,
something we should think about.
I think a viewing area is a great.
Yeah, then you could say, this is the place to be, no one can be anywhere else, it could be designated spot.
You could give away some of the bricks to the Mount Pleasant alumni. I have a brick from the Carnegie.
I really want to push to 11 o'clock, I want to push to like 5 after 10, that's
Well,
what I
since we're not really giving direction anymore, we can continue this conversation in the parking lot. But are there any other questions or comments for Mr. Chief Band? Hearing none. Do you have anything else?
no, sir.
Do we have any comments or information from the members of the commission?
I have a couple of things. I just want the other commissioners to know that I have attended my first Willamette Falls Heritage Area Coalition meeting, and I was welcomed with open arms, and of course, they're gonna try to get me to do something, and I've already said no, so wish me luck with that. I've also started my meetings with the DACA folks. I haven't met with the president of the organization yet, but I have that on my agenda. but I've met with staff and they're already familiar with me because I serve on a committee of theirs already. So I just want you to know that I've forged ahead. I've also been meeting with staff. So that's what I've been up to.
Very good. Commissioner Smith.
One of the topics tonight was the charter issue regarding citizens vote, which was a topic that was dealt with by a previous commission. I would like to say that I would like an update on the other cities and their work towards fighting the state on that topic, and whether or not this commission wants to, maybe there's not a way to get involved in that at this point at all. It's a different commission, we have not had that conversation. It was an extensive debate in the campaigns about which of us as candidates supported the charter and would have, if we were on the commission, supported the decision that was made by the previous commission, which was we have to follow what the state says. When we pick and choose that, and in this case, the commission did not choose to do that. And knowing that the city predates the state and our normal commitment to fight for our city's charter, I think it might be an interesting conversation to re-bring up.
Not all the former commission chose that direction.
No, I agree. I mean, and I don't know that we need to
Okay.
decide on that to become an issue. It's on my radar. I want
I think
staff
it's-
to know that I
it's
feel that
worthwhile.
it's something we should be talking about. But I think there's a lot of things on the plate that the last commission decided that we've asked to bring back, and a lot of them aren't coming back, and so I'm gonna keep
Understood.
harping on them.
So where do we glean that information? League of Oregon Cities or, okay,
I can get you an update.
that would be fine.
Happy to do that.
Commissioner Wiles, nothing from me. That being said, I think we've made it to adjournment.